The forest full of singing birds. Leela loved listening. Every morning she pressed her ear to the window to hear the world waking up. A kettle that hummed, a cat that mewed, a far-off bell that rang. One afternoon she heard something new, a soft, looping tune drifting from the trees near her house. It sounded like someone humming and smiling all at once. Curious, she slipped on her little shoes, tucked a pebble and a ribbon into her pocket, and tiptoed toward the green whisper of the forest. The path smelled of moss and warm earth. She felt all kinds of curious in her belly. As Leela walked between tall trunks, the tune grew clearer. Peeps and trills like tiny bells, swoops of melody like ribbon in the breeze. Sunlight threaded through the leaves and dust motes danced like tiny singers. The first bird was a robin with a red chest who hopped down to greet her. He chirped a bright hello that sounded like two quick notes and a giggle. Leela smiled and answered with a soft hum. The robin bobbed and bobbed, pleased to hear her hum back. Around them, other birds rustled nearby, curious too. Deeper in, a bluebird with feathers like the sky opened her voice and poured a long, clear note that shivered like a bell. Leela thought it sounded like someone saying hello in a slow, lovely way. A yellow canary bounced in the branches and sent out quick, twinkling notes that felt like sunshine laughing. The forest seemed to arrange the music like a story. Peeps, then bells, then bright little sparks. A soft rustle revealed a friendly fox tail behind a fern. He peered out with gentle eyes and a small, swaying smile, as if the music made him want to tap a paw. At the heart of the trees stood the old oak, wider than a house and wrapped with little green vines. Its branches spread like a blanket and leaves whispered like old friends. Tucked into a low crook was a tiny golden whistle, tied with a faded ribbon that had once been bright. The robin hopped to the oak and tapped the whistle with his beak. Sometimes, the bird said, the whistle kept a whisper of every song the forest had ever sung. Leela peered and wondered, could a small whistle hold so much music? The birds spoke in trills and peeps about a hush that sometimes visited their wings. Some mornings our songs feel sleepy, Bluebell said, and Sunny chirped that her bright notes would wobble and fall. Leela's brow furrowed. She wanted to help. The robin hopped onto Leela's shoulder as if to say, "We try to remember, but some notes hide." Mr. Fox sat nearer, ears twitching to listen. The old oak rumbled softly, telling Leela that music loved company and sometimes needed a new friend to wake it up. Leela reached out and touched the little golden whistle. It was warm from the day's sun and it tinkled with a tiny note when she moved it. "Try it," the robin encouraged. Leela lifted the whistle and blew softly. A thin silver sound slipped out and dangled in the air like a string of tiny bells. The birds circled, eyes wide like cups drinking the sound. The forest leaned in. The whistle's note was small, but it was the start of something. Leela felt a tiny flutter of bravery. She had made one bright sound. Leela tried another note, and the whistle answered with a kind echo. But as she blew more loudly to help the birds remember, the sounds tangled together. Bell with chirp, bright twinkle with deep hum, and for a moment the forest grew puzzled. A breeze picked up and leaves shivered. A tiny hush slipped between the trees. The birds halted mid-song and looked uncertain. Leela's cheeks grew warm. She hadn't meant to tangle the tunes. She put the whistle down and listened very carefully, wanting to hear how to make the music happy again. Just then, a soft cloud rolled over the sun and the forest held its breath. The robin hopped forward and peeped a tiny, steady note. Bluebell followed with a long bell-like sound, pure and wide. Sunny sprinkled little high notes like pebbles. Leela remembered how each had sounded when she first came in, the robin's quick giggle, Bluebell's slow bell, Sunny's bright twinkles. Her face lit up. "We must help each other sing our own notes," she said. Her voice was small but sure, and it sounded like a lantern turning on. This is the story's bright, joyful moment. Leela led the birds in a little game. She tapped the robin gently and copied his quick two-note chirp. Then she nodded to Bluebell and breathed a slow, bell-like note back. Sunny fluttered, and Leela tried the tiny sparkling sounds. The forest answered back, echoes weaving like ribbons. Mr. Fox pawed a tiny beat on the ground and leaves danced. Each bird remembered its own song, and when they sang together, their voices braided into something new and glittering. Leela clapped with a laugh. As the music grew, the old oak seemed to hum along. Even the hollow creaked a happy squeak. Birds flew in small loops, and the sound traveled like a ribbon across the treetops. The moonlight pond in the distance flashed little silver ripples as if clapping with water. Leela felt the melody hop into her bones and skip out through her fingertips. She danced a tiny circle, and Mr. Fox joined with a gentle twirl. The whistle, left on its ribbon, chimed every time a bird passed, adding a tiny bell to the harmony. When the sun began to lower, the birds gathered on the old oak's branches like little bright notes pinned against the sky. They thanked Leela in chirps and trills, and the robin hopped onto her little shoulder in thanks. "Come again," Bluebell sang like a promise. Leela tied a tiny ribbon of her own to the whistle's string so it would remember her touch. Mr. Fox kissed her knobby knee with a soft nuzzle. Leela felt sleepy and proud at once. She had helped the forest remember how to sing. On the path home, the trees hummed behind her with new stories tucked in their leaves. Leela hummed back each tune she remembered, and for a while her melody mixed with the far-off last notes of the birds. The pebble in her pocket felt like a tiny drum. She promised to visit again and to bring new songs she found in puddles and on the playground. That night, at her window, the forest's music lulled her. In her dreams, the birds gave her a crown woven of leaves and song, and she wore it while the whole sky sang softly. The next morning, the sun painted her room gold, and a small bright chirp drifted to her window. Leela smiled in her sleep and stretched like a happy cat. Outside, the forest had kept its songs safe. Now they were threads between trees and people who paused to listen. Leela tucked her ribbon into a little book of sounds she kept under her pillow. When she grew up, she would remember how a small child with a pebble and a ribbon helped a whole forest sing again. For now, she dreamed of tunes, and the woods hummed a sleepy, gentle lullaby. The Enchanted Forest Picnic. Lily woke up with a giggle. Today was picnic day. She tucked a little picnic basket under her arm, wrapped a rainbow blanket around it, and slipped the magic pebble into her pocket like a secret. The pebble felt warm and hummed a tiny happy song only Lily could hear. She put on her red rain boots, waved goodbye to her cozy house, and skipped off toward the enchanted forest where leaves whispered hello and sunlight made polka dots on the path. Near a cluster of bluebells, Benny the bunny popped out with a cheerful hop. "Hello, Lily," Benny said, twitching his long ears and showing his tiny blue bow. He loved picnics almost as much as carrots. Lily laughed and sat down to rest. Together, they unrolled the rainbow blanket under a friendly oak. Benny offered a crunchy carrot, and Lily showed him the pebble. The pebble gave a tiny happy trill, and Benny clapped his paws in delight. Above them, Oliver the owl fluttered down from a low branch with a soft hoot. He adjusted his little spectacles and peered at the picnic. "A perfect spot for songs," he said. Soon Miri, the mole, popped up from a nearby molehill with a napkin and a tiny spoon for the berry jam jar. Everyone introduced themselves in merry whispers. The pebble hummed a tune, and the leaves shivered like clapping hands. The forest felt very pleased to have new friends gathered on its floor. Just then, the ground gave a gentle rumble, and Maple the talking tree leaned close, her leaves rustling like 1,000 tiny bells. "Welcome, little ones," she rumbled in a kind voice. "This is my favorite clearing. Share your kindness and it will shine back." The animals smiled. Lily placed the magic pebble in the center of the blanket. The pebble shivered and sent out tiny sparkles that hopped like fireflies. Everyone felt a little braver and very much loved. They opened the picnic basket together. Sandwiches with crunchy lettuce, a jar of sweet berry jam, tiny muffins, and carrot sticks spilled onto the blanket. Everyone took turns passing plates and saying what they liked best. The pebble hummed softly each time someone shared. Lily spread jam on a muffin for Benny, and Benny nudged a carrot to Miri. Little songs sprang up. Oliver tapped a wing to keep the beat, and even the leaves seemed to sway along with their gentle music. A soft drizzle began, like someone sprinkling glitter from the sky. Rosie the fox arrived with a bright leaf umbrella, and her bushy tail wrapped like a cozy scarf. "Rain makes picnics magical," she said with a grin. They all huddled close, sharing the umbrella and passing tiny bites. The pebble hummed louder when a crumb was shared or a kind word said. The raindrops turned into little twinkling beads when they touched the pebble, making a gentle tinkling song that made everyone giggle. Suddenly, the pebble hopped. It rolled toward a quiet puddle and shone so brightly the puddle glimmered. Then a tiny rainbow bridge rose across the water like a smiling ribbon. One by one, the friends crossed on tiptoe. Benny bounced, Miri waddled carefully, Oliver glided, Rosie trotted with a proud prance, and Lily held hands with them all. Laughter filled the air. The pebble sang a new, sparkly tune of friendship that made every step feel light and brave. When they reached the other side, a little bunny family waved hello, and a chorus of frogs hummed along to the pebble's tune. The animals shared songs and tiny dances. Maple's leaves clapped slowly like a gentle drum. Night began to tiptoe closer, sprinkling faint stars through the tree branches. The lantern was lit and cast warm, dancing light. Everyone snuggled on the rainbow blanket and listened to the pebble's lullaby, feeling safe and full of the day's tiny wonders. Before they packed up, Maple lowered a leaf and whispered, "Kindness grows here with you." Lily tucked the pebble back into her pocket, promising to remember the songs and sharing. They folded the rainbow blanket, closed the picnic basket, and carried away empty plates and happy hearts. Each friend helped tidy a little corner of the clearing so other forest visitors could find the place tidy and bright. The pebble hummed a tiny, proud note that sounded like a goodbye promise to return. Lily walked home by starlight, her red boots tapping soft beats on the path. The pebble hummed a sleep song against her chest. She waved to Maple and all her new friends and promised to come back soon with another basket and more stories. At her window, Lily tucked the pebble into a tiny dish and said, "Thank you." The pebble glowed once, like a sleepy wink. Lily fell asleep with the pebble's melody in her ears, dreaming of rainbows and songs and friends waiting in the enchanted forest. The secret message in a bottle. Maya loved mornings by the sea. She put on her stripy sun hat, grabbed Biscuit's leash, and walked to the wide, warm sand where the waves whispered. Today the shore smelled like salt and oranges, and little crabs popped like dots in the sand. Something bobbed near the tide line, a glass bottle with a tiny glow inside. Maya crouched, Biscuit sniffed and wagged his short tail, and together they reached for the bottle as if reaching for a secret friend waiting to be met. Maya picked up the bottle and wiped sand from its smooth glass. Inside, like a little sleeping star, was a rolled paper tied with silver seaweed. The cork came out with a small pop and a sprinkle of glitter. Biscuit barked once, excited and proud, and Maya unrolled the paper very slowly. Tiny drawings danced across the page, a heart-shaped rock, a wavy line of shells, and a little shining dot with an arrow. It looked like a map, but the drawings seemed to giggle when she looked at them. The paper had a secret message written in tiny star letters. It said, "Follow the silver dots, help a shy friend, bring a little light." Maya whispered the words aloud, and Biscuit tilted his head as if listening. The map pointed to a heart-shaped rock not far away, so Maya put the bottle into her bag and they began to hop along the warm sand. Every step made a tiny drum beat. Maya hummed, Biscuit pranced, and the sea seemed to watch like a friendly giant with gentle eyes. When they reached the heart-shaped rock, a white seagull swooped down and landed with one wing tucked, as if saying hello. "Hello, I'm Swoosh," he called in a cheerful voice and tipped his head. Swoosh had seen many tides and many bottles, and he decided he would come along. He pointed his beak toward a shallow tide pool where shells lay like small moons. The map's silver dots shimmered like a secret path across the sand. Maya clapped softly. She liked that the adventure had a friend to help. At the tide pool, small waves sighed and showed colorful stones. A crab with a shiny red shell waved a claw and led them toward a tiny hollow beneath a clump of seaweed. "There," whispered Swoosh, and the little hollow gleamed. Inside lay a small folded piece of paper that looked very old. When Maya opened it, the paper breathed a faint silver light. The moonbeam map. It made little sparkles in the air like fireflies, showing a curving line to a hidden cove guarded by a smiling palm tree. They followed the moonbeam map along a path of shells, hopping over little dunes and stepping around sleepy seaweed piles. Sometimes Maya danced in the sand, and Biscuit chased his own shadow. Swoosh flew ahead to check the way and came back bringing tiny sea-scented stories. The sun played peekaboo with a few clouds, and everything felt like a game that only 3 brave friends could play. The silver dots on the map glowed a bit brighter as if cheering them on. Soon they reached a little cove where a tiny island sat like a green bump in the blue, and a small palm tree smiled at the sky. Palm Tree Pete waved his leaves like friendly hands and shaded a cozy nook where the sand was soft. There, tucked in a circle of shells, was a glowing ripple. a small fish no bigger than Maya's hand, shimmering like moonlight on water. The fish blinked with shy silver eyes and trembled a little, as if it had been waiting for very kind helpers. The little fish sighed a tiny bubble and sent another soft glow. "I am Glimmer," it whispered in ripple sounds. "I lost my way to the deep blue where my friends sleep. I get afraid in shallow puddles." Maya knelt and cupped her hands gently. She wrapped a small wet shell around the fish like a blanket and promised she would help. Biscuit pressed his nose gently to the water's edge, and Swoosh unfurled a plan that sounded very important and very funny all at once. They built a tiny, shiny path of shells and sea glass that led from the cove to the edge of the sea, arranging them like stepping stones the fish could follow in the water. Maya hummed a soft song and Swoosh kept watch from above. Biscuit fetched a smooth shell now and then, proud as a helper. The moonbeam map's silver dots winked as if to say, "Yes, that is the way." Little by little, the water grew deeper and the path glowed brighter, helping Glimmer feel braver. When the path reached the gentle surf, Glimmer trembled one last time and then swam forward, leaving a tiny sparkling trail like a silver kite. The deeper water hugged the fish in welcome. Then, pop! A ripple darted back and left a small pearly gift at Maya's feet. It was a little pearl, warm and humming with gratitude. Glimmer circled once and flicked a thankful shimmer that made the bottle in Maya's bag sparkle, as if it, too, was smiling. The map's secret message now glowed softly on the paper. Kindness finds its way when friends follow the dots. Maya tucked the little pearl into her small palm and felt it warm like a tiny sun. Biscuit wagged so fast his tail was a blur, and Swoosh flew loops as if doing a happy dance. They all cheered in soft voices so the sea would not wake anyone else, and Palm Tree Pete waved his leaves like a sleepy friend saying, "Well done." Before the sun slid down, Maya put the empty, sparkly bottle back on the sand with a new note inside. She wrote in big, careful letters, "Thank you, friends. We helped Glimmer go home. Pass it on." Then she tied it with a little seaweed bow and corked it softly. Biscuit gave a triumphant bark, and Swoosh helped push the bottle so it bobbed out to sea with a tiny silver wake. The bottle glittered like a message full of smiles and set off to find someone else who needed help. As evening painted the sky in pink and blue, Maya and Biscuit walked home with sandy toes and pockets of small shells. Maya held the little pearl safe and whispered a promise to keep helping. She knew the bottle would carry their story somewhere else, maybe to a child with a lost toy or an animal that needed a friend. That night, tucked into bed, Maya placed the warm pearl on her bedside shelf so she could remember how even tiny hands can make big kindnesses. Sometimes, when the moon was a silver pebble, Maya could hear a soft thump at her window, a tiny wave sound that felt like a friend saying hello. She would smile and think of the day the bottle glowed, the map winked, and a shy fish found its way. The secret message in the bottle had been more than paper. It had been an idea that kindness travels on and on, like a little boat across the sea. Maya fell asleep knowing tomorrow might bring another tiny adventure. The Dragon's Birthday Party Fiasco. Dara the dragon woke up the morning of her birthday with a flutter in her tummy. Sunlight slipped through the leaves and made a golden spot on her leaf-shaped pillow. She nuzzled her stuffed cloud and practiced a tiny happy puff that smelled faintly of clover. Today the forest would be full of friends, music, and cake. Dara's eyes sparkled with plans: pretty balloons, a picnic blanket, and a song that everyone could sing together. She put on a small blue ribbon and hurried outside to prepare. One by one, the friends arrived, each carrying something special. Benny Bunny bounced in with a basket of sweet carrot cupcakes and a paper hat pinned to his ear. Squeak the squirrel tumbled down from an oak branch with a string of sparkling balloons looped around his tail. Pip the bird fluttered in, singing tiny notes with a shiny feather tucked behind one ear. Tilly the turtle came slowly, steady as a drum, holding a small old music box wrapped in twine. The clearing smelled like grass and giggles. They spread the picnic blanket under a friendly oak and began to decorate. Dara tied streamers between branches while Squeak carefully placed balloons in a bright cluster. Benny distributed starry party hats and Pip perched on a twig to hang tiny paper lanterns. Tilly set the music box in the middle, winding it slowly until a sweet, tinkling melody began. The song wobbled like a little bell, and everyone clapped along. It felt like magic. Leaves rustled applause, and the sun winked through the branches. Dara wanted to light the candles herself because tiny dragon puffs can be very precise. She breathed a small, careful puff to warm the candle wicks and smiled proudly. But Dara giggled at how proud she felt. Her giggles made her tummy tickle, and her tiny puffs puffed a little stronger. A barely there breeze nudged balloons and toppled one hat. Pip chirped, "Oh!" Benny's ears flopped in surprise, and even the music box played a skip in its tune. Everyone giggled because surprises were funny at parties. Then the first little mishap happened. When Dara tried again, one puff asked to be extra excited, and whoosh, candles flared a wee bit too bright. The frosting on top steamed like a hot marshmallow, and the cake trembled with surprise. Squeak clutched his balloons, and Benny used his paws to fan a gentle breeze away from the flames. Dara turned her head apologetically, cheeks rosy. She didn't like making trouble. Tilly wound the music box again to calm the tune, and everyone watched the patch of steam curl up into the sky. Countless little giggles and puffs led to more tiny surprises. A stray puff sent a few balloons floating faster than Squeak expected, and one balloon nudged a paper hat until it tumbled into the grass. Pip fluttered after the hat like a blue bird on a windy day. The friends tried to steady the decorations, but every time they adjusted something, Dara's excitement made a new wobble begin. They all laughed a little louder. Laughter was the best tablecloth, folding them together even when things wobbled. Benny suggested a silly game to calm everyone down. A hat parade. Each friend collected a hat, put it on, and marched around the blanket to the tiny music box tune. Dara marched too, careful to keep her puffs tiny, but halfway through her snooty snout wiggle, she hiccuped a puff that blew the music box's little lid up. The lid popped, and the tune turned into a comical squeak. The friends laughed so hard their steps slowed, and a small butterfly landed on Dara's ribbon as if listening with them. For the next surprise, someone brought out the sparklers. No, not sparklers, just fizzy fruit drinks that bubbled and fizzed. The bottles popped and tickled everyone's noses. Dara sneezed the tiniest puff that tickled a balloon string, and the string slipped free. One balloon drifted toward the stream and danced on the breeze. It bobbed over pebbles and leaves, making a soft splish-splash sound like a tiny drum. "Oh dear," called Tilly, steady but worried. The friends jumped to help chase the drifting balloon. They tried to catch the balloon, but it had a mind of its own. It floated just out of reach, teasing them over rocks and leaves. Pip flew after it, chirping encouragement, while Squeak scurried and Benny hopped. Dara moved very slowly so she wouldn't puff the balloon farther away, but her excitement made her step a little too quick, and whoops. The cake you hadn't noticed was placed on a small hill began to wobble. The cake rolled gently like a sweet round pebble, and the friends gasped. The cake rolled faster than anyone expected. It bounced once, twice, and popped a bit of frosting like a tiny cloud. The cake sailed past the picnic blanket and went tumbling down a little grassy slope toward a shallow bend in the stream. "Stop!" cried Benny, but the cake was already hopping on a pebble like a merry, sticky rock. Pip fluttered above, flapping hard, and Squeak clicked his teeth in worry. Dara's heart beat soft and loud. She felt responsible, even though it was an accident. The cake hopped onto a smooth stone and slid into the shallow water with a tiny plop. For a moment, there was cake bobbing like a little raft. The frosting rippled with the water, and a few sprinkles drifted away like colorful seeds. Tilly, who had the slowest steps but the steadiest heart, suggested making a raft. "We can build a safe boat for Cake," she said in her steady voice. Everyone looked at one another and then nodded with determination, ready to work as a team. First, they found fallen twigs and a flat bit of bark. Squeak scurried to collect small leaves while Benny balanced a larger leaf like a paddle. Pip fetched light feathers, and Tilly arranged the twigs in a neat little stack. Dara gently blew the tiniest puff to push the cake raft toward the bank, careful not to make waves. Her breath was soft and warm, like a summer breeze, and the friends held their breaths until the cake bumped gently against the mud and sheltered rocks. When the cake was safe, the frosting was a little squished but still sweet. The friends clapped and giggled, and Benny offered the first slice to Dara with a flour-dusted bow. Dara's eyes filled with warm tears that were really tiny, glistening smiles. She felt loved even when things went wobble-wobble. They set the cake back on the blanket and rearranged hats and balloons, tying strings extra snug. The music box played again, this time steady and bright, and Pip began a cheerful trill that made everyone sway. Just when they thought the surprises were over, a sudden gust from some playful wind tangled the balloons into a big, colorful knot. The knot lifted the streamers and almost sent the party hats spinning. Dara laughed so strongly that she hiccuped a tiny heart-shaped puff that floated like a soap bubble. The sound of their laughter chased the wind away, but the balloons stayed stubbornly knotted. Squeak bit his lip in concentration, and Benny rubbed his paws together. The friends were ready for one more clever plan. They tried gentle tugs, steady pulls, and soft wiggles, but the knot held firm. Then Pip had an idea. Make a little pulley using a twig and a loop of string, and let Tilly guide the music box melody to keep everyone calm. Working together, they built the simple pulley and took turns humming the song. Slowly, carefully, the knot loosened. The balloons drifted free and bobbed above like a friendly rainbow. All the friends cheered, their voices folding into the music box's tinkling tune. At last, it was time for the birthday song. Everyone put on their hats and circled the picnic blanket. Tilly wound the music box, and Pip fluttered above, leading the tune. Benny hopped and clapped, Squeak twirled his tail, and Dara sat very still, taking a deep, careful breath so her puffs would be gentle. They sang a happy, bumbling song that made stars of leaves twinkle overhead. When the song ended, Dara closed her eyes and blew out the candles with the tiniest, faintest puff she could make. After the song, they shared the cake and the fizzy drinks, and every bite tasted like the kind of perfect sweet that comes from friendship. They told silly stories about the morning's mishaps, the dancing balloon, the rolling cake, and the knot of balloons that turned into a rainbow. Dara hugged each friend with a careful, warm squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered, when the sun began to dip. The friends arranged themselves into a cozy pile of smiles on the blanket, full and sleepy and bright-eyed. As evening painted the sky in lavender and tangerine, the music box played a soft lullaby. Fireflies began to blink like tiny lanterns above the clearing. The friends leaned back and watched the first stars appear, counting one by one. Dara's ribbon fluttered in the cool breeze, and a dandelion seed drifted onto her nose, making her giggle quietly. They promised to remember this birthday, not because everything went perfectly, but because they had helped each other when things went topsy-turvy. Before they left, Dara gave each friend a tiny thank you gift, a hand-drawn star on a leaf. The stars shone just a little in the dim light because they were made with giggles and gratitude. Benny tucked his leaf into his hat, Squeak pinned his behind his ear, Pip held his carefully in a claw, and Tilly placed hers on her shell. Dara kept the smallest star for herself and put it by her pillow that night. She felt sleepy and very, very loved. When the moon rose high, the clearing quieted to a hush of soft snores and contented breaths. Dara curled up on her leaf-shaped pillow and remembered every wobble and giggle of the day. She thought about how a rolling cake had become an adventure and how a balloon knot had become a rainbow. Sleep wrapped her like a warm blanket, and in her dreams, the friends danced around a cake that smiled with frosting moons. Tomorrow, the forest would tell the story of the dragon's delightful, messy, marvelous birthday. Long after the party, flowers near the stream still looked a little dusted with frosting sprinkles, and a tiny music note seemed to hum in the breeze. Neighbors walked by and smiled, because in that forest a birthday had been more than candles and presents. It had been a day when friends fixed mistakes with kind hands and silly ideas. Dara woke the next morning with a stretch and a smile, already planning next year's party, perhaps with kites instead of balloons. She giggled and practiced a careful puff, ready for new surprises. The Secret of the Old Mill. At the edge of the little village stood the old mill. It leaned a tiny bit to the left and hummed with the wind. Children liked to run past it and clap their hands when the wheel turned slow. Myra loved the mill best. She wore a bright blue scarf and tiny freckles on her nose. Each evening, she would sit on the low stone and listen for whispers from inside the round window. The whispers sounded like the end of a song and the start of a new one. Pip the squirrel and Benny the mill mouse were Myra's friends. Pip chased sunbeams and loved shiny little things. Benny was small and careful and always carried a tiny crumb for later. The three of them pretended the mill was a castle, a rocket, and a cave that kept secrets. One morning, when the dew still made the grass sparkle, Pip spotted something glinting in the moss. It was tiny and bright. He called, "Myra, Benny, look." Myra reached into the cool moss and found a tiny golden key. It fit in her palm like a little sun. The key had a leaf-shaped bow and a gentle sparkle that made Pip chatter excitedly. Where did it come from? Myra wondered. Benny sniffed it with tiny whiskers and squeaked once. The key hummed softly and felt warm. It looked as if it wanted to find a special lock, so Myra held it up to the mill, and the round window seemed to blink as if listening. They walked all around the old mill to find a lock the key might open. The wooden wheel creaked, and the air smelled of warm bread and wet leaves. There was a tiny door near the back, just above the roots of an old willow. It was round and small, with a little keyhole tucked beneath a patch of moss. Their hearts tapped like little drums. Myra knelt down and held the key to the keyhole. Pip and Benny watched in a hush so quiet butterflies would have been surprised to move. Myra slid the tiny golden key into the keyhole and turned it with a hopeful wiggle. The key clicked like a tiny bell, and a soft chime rolled through the mill like a sleepy laugh. The round door opened just a crack, and a warm, gentle light spilled out, smelling faintly of cinnamon and rain. A narrow, curved stairway curled down like the inside of a shell. Pip squeaked with delight, and Benny tucked his crumb higher in his fur to be ready for anything. They tiptoed down the curving stair. The room at the bottom smelled of old paper and wildflowers. Shelves hugged the round walls, and jars with buttons, ribbons, and tiny bells lined them up like smiley rows. A little wooden shelf held a tiny music box carved to look like a mill. When Myra brushed away a leaf, she saw that the music box had a winding keyhole and a painted wheel, and it trembled like it wanted to wake up. Pip's whiskers twitched. Benny held his breath. Myra gently wound the music box. It began to play a tune so soft it felt like a hug. The mill's little window upstairs hummed back, and lanterns flickered on within the tiny room. The tune smelled like rain on summer stones and tasted like fresh bread crumbs in Benny's memory. As the song spun, the paint on the music box glowed and tiny silver notes drifted up like dandelion fluff. Those notes tucked themselves into jars and corners, making the whole room breathe in song. Then, from the curl of a millstone, a breeze unfolded into shape and winked at them. It was Windle, a tiny breeze spirit, all ribbons, leaves, and gentle light. Windle laughed in little gusts and danced around Pip's tail. "Hello," Windle whispered, its voice like a bell in a shell. "You found my music." Myra felt a flutter of happiness. Windle's ribbons smelled like first leaves and made tiny sparkles on the floor. Benny's tiny paws tapped to the tune. Windle twirled and told them the mill's secret. "I collect songs," it said, "and stories and little sleepy sighs. I fold them into jars and tuck them under stones. I keep giggles safe so they can be used again." Myra listened with wide eyes. Pip hopped in a circle like a spring. Benny snuggled closer and felt proud that he had kept crumbs for so long. The old mill was not just a building. It was a treasure box of tiny sounds that made the village glad. Windle showed them jars labeled with tiny words. First laughs, raindrop rhythm, lullaby, and moonshine hum. When it popped a jar open, a soft sound puffed out and painted tiny rainbows in the air. The mill had collected the village's happiest little noises for years. Myra and her friends felt like keepers of something kind and important. "Can we help?" Myra asked. Wendell swirled happily. Yes, we can mend a torn tune and stitch a missing rhyme together. They made a plan. Myra would hum a tune, Pip would chase the scattering notes, and Benny would tuck the smallest whispers into a safe jar. For a while, everything hummed like a happy kitchen. They mended a torn lullaby that had lost a line, and they stitched a lost rhyme back to its song. Wendell taught them how to fold sound gently and place it on a shelf where it would not get lonely. The mill hummed along, pleased as a cat in sunshine. Suddenly, the sky angrily rolled a thundercloud and rain started to drum on the mill roof. A big gust rattled the window and made the lanterns sway. Some loose musical notes slipped free and tumbled out the little door. Wendell tried to hold them, but it began to thin like mist. "Oh no," Pip shouted as the storm pulled at the songs. The wheel groaned and the jars rattled. The mill sounded worried, and Myra's heart knocked very fast. This was the moment they needed to be brave. Myra took a deep breath and began to sing the tune they had mended. Her voice was steady and warm like bread fresh from the oven. Pip leapt into a gust and caught 2 fluttering notes with a brave little cheer. Benny scampered along the edge and pushed a bell to ring a steady beat. Wendell gathered itself with a small swirl, warmed by their voices, and puffed up stronger. Together, they sang louder and softer, louder again, until the notes remembered where they belonged. The storm grumbled away, leaving shiny puddles and a sky brushed with pink. The old mill sighed a happy, creaky sigh. Wendell danced and glittered, fuller and brighter than before. The jars were whole, and the music box sang a little skitter of a tune to say thank you. Wendell tied a tiny ribbon around Myra's scarf and gave Pip a small leaf to keep, and Benny a crumb that tasted like honey and sunshine. They all felt the gentle hush of a day saved by friends. From that day on, the mill kept its secret happily, but it also opened once in a while for quiet visitors. Myra, Pip, and Benny would come to listen and to help Wendell gather new sounds. The clink of spoons, a baby's first giggle, the soft squeak of a sleepy owl. The village never knew the exact way their little noises were kept safe, but they liked to see the mill glow at night. Myra would smile and tuck her hand into her scarf where the tiny key sometimes hummed. When bedtime came, Myra would say goodnight to the old mill and to Wendell. "Keep our songs safe," she would whisper, and Wendell would swirl like a sleepy ribbon and promise to do so. The music box sat on its shelf and hummed a little lullaby that smelled of moonlight. Pip curled around a tiny acorn, and Benny tucked his crumb under a leaf. The mill hummed softly in the dark. The secret was not a secret meant to hide, but a gentle promise to guard the small, bright things that make life kind. And sometimes, on wind-breath nights, the village kids would hear a whisper of a tune and hum along without knowing why their toes wanted to tap. That was the old mill sharing a sprig of its secret with everyone. Myra would look up at the mill and smile, knowing that some treasures are kept for sharing. The mill would wink its round window, and the sparkling stream would add a little sparkle to the song. The secret stayed secret enough to be special, but bright enough to make nights sweet. The Pirate Queen of Sunken Cove. Pirate Queen Myra lived where the sea hugs the sand and the sun naps on the rocks. She wore a floppy sun hat with a tiny shell stuck to the brim and a striped shirt that smelled of salt and story time. Every morning she climbed into bubbling, her little shell-shaped ship that clicked like a seashell when it sailed. Her parrot Pico squawked hello and twirled his pirate bandana. The waves sang soft rather than loud, and even the gulls hummed along. Myra whispered, "Today we will find a secret." And the sea winked back. Bubbling bobbed like a sleepy bubble as Myra and Pico set off. Pico loved to point with one tiny claw and sing tiny pirate songs. Dip, dip, dive. The sea sniffed and blew a small, misty hello. Tuck the turtle surfaced slowly to wave with a flipper, and Waver the whale puffed a soft, tickly spray that smelled like blueberries and giggles. The crew waved back, and the sandy map flapped its paper wings. The map had little dotted footsteps that wiggled just a bit when Myra smiled. Adventure felt like a warm blanket on a chilly morning. They sailed toward Sunken Cove, a hidden bowl shaped like a lullaby. The cove was quiet and cozy, rings of smooth rocks like a tucked-in blanket. Glowy starfish twinkled on the shoreline, tiny lanterns of gold. The singing seashell lay half buried in the sand and chimed like small bell tides whenever the water kissed it. Myra listened close and hummed back. The sandy map whispered, "2 hops past the pebble that looks like a nose," and Pico hopped twice on the rail, making all aboard giggle. Sunlight made the water look like melted honey. Near a pebble shaped like a nose, they found a tiny sign, "Sunken Cove Welcome." The sign wobbled as if it had a shy hello. Crabby the crab scuttled out from behind seaweed, clicking his claws like small castanets. He looked fierce but blinked polite eyes. He had been guarding a secret for a long time, a secret that hummed under the sand. Myra sat down and offered a bit of her sandwich, and Crabby softened, his claws tapping a gentle rhythm. "Would you help us?" she asked, and he clicked twice like yes. The sandy map shivered and unrolled a path of tiny dots that glittered. It pointed down into a shallow pool where the tides whispered and the sand hummed. The moonbox sleeps beneath the hush of the tide. The map sang in wrinkled letters. Pico fluffed his feathers and chirped in a beat, making the map dance. Myra put on her listening ears, the kind of ears that listen with more than 2 sides. Everyone bent close. The sea seemed to breathe slow, like a sleepy giant, and the path looked like a string of moonbeams. Myra and her friends hopped along the dotted path. 1 hop, 2 hop, splash. Tuck the turtle plodded and hummed a slow song to keep the steps steady. Waver the whale sang a deep note that made the water wobble like jelly, and the singing seashell chimed in. The path led under a little arch of rock where tiny fish waved their fins like flags. Shadows played hide-and-seek. Myra felt a flutter in her tummy, happy butterflies that travel in seashells. "Almost there," she whispered, and the map nodded, creasing a smile. At the pool's hush, they found the moonbox, half buried and humming like a small moon. It had brass stars and a tiny keyhole shaped like a heart, but the heart key was missing. A riddle was tucked under its lid. "To open my heart, you must share what you start. Sing with your friends, and kindness will part." The riddle sounded like someone tapping a soft drum. Pico squawked and repeated the last line in a squeaky chorus. Myra sat very still and thought of times she had shared her hat, her sandwich, and her giggles. They tried keys and counted coins, but nothing fit. Then Myra asked, "What does sharing sound like here?" Tuck leaned forward and offered his slow song. Waver blew warm spouts that made bubbles pop like tiny laughter. Crabby clicked his claws in a gentle rhythm, not loud but steady. Pico sang the silliest pirate song he knew, and the singing seashell chimed with each note. The crew held hands and fins and claws. The moonbox thrummed louder, and the sand around it shimmered like a smile cracking open. Suddenly, the cove sighed and a tiny breeze zipped through, carrying a sparkle. The moonbox sprang open with a soft pop, and out floated not gold coins, but a handful of bright, tiny lanterns shaped like smiley stars. Each lantern hummed a happy tune and smelled of warm toast and peppermint. Myra picked one up and felt it brighten her heart like a tiny sun. The riddle's answer was not treasure to hoard, but lights to share. Pico giggled and did a pirouette on the rail in delight. Everyone clapped and sang together. Just then, a wobbly wind came in from the open sea, a little storm that sniffed and seemed grumpy. It ruffled Pico's feathers and tousled Myra's hat. The lanterns trembled and blinked like shy fireflies. Myra stood up tall and said, "We will share our lights and calm the grumpy breeze." They passed a lantern to Tuck to carry slowly, another to Crabby who tucked it under his claw like a tiny sun, and one to Waver who placed it on his back so the big waves could be gentle. Together they hummed the kind song the sandy map taught them. The grumpy storm listened. The lantern's lights made patterns of warm polka dots on the waves. Pico sang squeaky, friendly notes that turned the wind into a gentle pillow. Crabby tapped little beats that matched the rain sprite's tiny steps. Myra swayed and hummed, and the sandy map nodded like a wise old friend. Piece by piece, the storm tucked itself back into a cloud and fell asleep, smiling. The cove sighed with relief and sent a ribbon of foam that kissed everyone's toes like a thank you. They all laughed, sticky and happy. With the cove calm, Myra had an idea. She suggested making a little parade to share the lanterns with all the hidden places around the rocks. Each friend held a light, and each light made a new friend feel brave. They lined up, Pico in front with a bell, Myra leading with a lantern, Tuck steady, Crabby clicking, Waver swimming beside with a glowing back. They marched and bobbed, singing the sharing song. Shells opened a bit to listen, little fish lit up like twinkling beads, and even the pebbles seemed to grin. At the end of their parade, they came to a tiny rock pool where a little shell baby had lost its lullaby. The shell baby shivered quietly. Myra knelt and cupped a lantern near the little shell so it could feel warm and listened to its tiny hiccup of song. The crew sang the song they had made together. The shell baby's hiccup turned into a cheer-up, then a song, and then a joyful squeal that joined the Cove chorus. Myra felt her chest swell with a full, gentle joy that tasted like sweet sea sugar. Night came on like a soft blanket. Stars popped awake and painted the sky with tiny holes of light. Bubbling floated home slowly, carrying sleepy passengers and pockets of lantern glow that shimmered in the dark. The sandy map curled up in Myra's lap and yawned a little crackle. Pico tucked his head under Myra's chin and mumbled a last little pirate rhyme. The sea hummed a slow goodnight, and even the moonbox hummed from where they had left it, content and quiet. The cove glowed gentle as a bedtime story. In the morning, Myra invited every friend to the shore for a sharing tea cups of warm sea mint with tiny seashell cookies. They sat in a circle and passed the moonbox between them, remembering how they had listened and shared. Crabby clapped his claws, which sounded like small bells, and Waver hummed a happy low note that made the cups ripple gently. They decided to leave one lantern at the heart of Sunken, Cove so new friends would always find a warm light. The moonbox felt full of tiny giggles and good promises. Before they sailed away, Myra planted a little flag made of fabric scraps sewn by Pico's tiny beak. The flag said, "Share lights, share smiles." It fluttered proud on a smooth rock, and the glowy starfish gathered around like tiny guardians. Creatures of Sunken Cove peeked to see the new message of the place. Come as you are, bring what you can. Myra hugged each friend and promised to return with new songs. Pico promised to practice pirates' polkas and maybe learn 2 new rhymes by then. Bubbling paddled back into the calm sea, carrying the crew and little lantern light footprints on the water. The sandy map folded itself neatly away, and the singing seashell kept ticking tiny songs into the breeze. Myra looked back at Sunken Cove, where lights winked like a handful of tiny moons. She felt like a small captain with a very big heart. Pico squeaked a cheerful note that tasted like marshmallows, and everyone hummed along. They sailed home slowly, pockets full of shared light and pockets full of new songs. At bedtime, Myra tucked her lantern beside her bed and whispered the day's songs to the moon. The moonbox's little hum echoed softly from a shelf, reminding her that secrets shared are warm and safe. She dreamed of the cove smiling and of Pico learning silly polkas. In her dream, the sea pressed her hand softly and promised more slow afternoons filled with friends. When morning came, she yawned big and stretched, ready to sail again. There were always more small adventures waiting just after breakfast. Every child who heard the story of the Pirate Queen of Sunken Cove learned a little secret. Treasures can be soft and small, like lanterns, songs, and the kindness you hand over with both paws and claws. The world kept turning like a slow bubble, and Myra kept sailing, leaving tiny lights in the waves so other little sailors would never feel alone. The cove stayed warm and friendly, a place where the sea hummed lullabies and no one had to open a chest alone. And when you hear the sea tonight, maybe you will sing too. The Snow Queen's Icy Kingdom. When the first snow of evening fell in tiny silver feathers, Nia pressed her mittened nose to the frosty window. Outside, a single snowflake winked like a tiny star and tapped the glass. It wasn't ordinary. It hummed a soft little tune that sounded like wind chimes and laughter. Curious, Nia wrapped her scarf tight, unlatched the window, and stepped onto the porch. The cold bit her cheeks, but the snowflake glowed, held out a twinkling finger, and Nia felt a warm, brave bubble in her chest. Outside, the snowflake led Nia through a hush of trees, and a soft rustle announced Fen the fox. Fen had a tail that glittered with tiny snow dust. He bowed politely and introduced himself with a quick, friendly sneeze. Nia giggled, and together they walked. The snow crunched underfoot like popped sugar. Loomy lanterns swung from Fen's collar, casting a cozy golden puddle on the snow. The little trio followed the silver trail that the snowflake hummed, and the world felt like a secret map being revealed one step at a time. They met Pippin the snowman in a clearing where snowballs grew like friendly mushrooms. Pippin was round and jolly with pebble eyes and a carrot nose that bobbed when he laughed. He offered Nia a mitten-shaped map made of frost that twinkled when you touched it. The map pointed toward the icy castle and danced with tiny lights, like a little parade of stars. Above them, the aurora ribbon stitched bands of color into the night, humming a song that made the snow prance and the trees sway gently. At the edge of the forest, they found a gate carved of clear ice that chimed when the breeze passed through it. Beyond the gate rose the icy castle, towers like glass, balconies like lace, and stairways that shimmered with frost. Frosty spires caught moonlight and turned it into 1,000 tiny lanterns. Nia put her mitten to the gate and heard the castle breathe like a sleeping giant that liked to dream in glitter. Fenn's tail sparkled in approval, and the snowflake friends zipped ahead, tapping the gate to say it was time to enter. Inside the castle, the halls hummed with music made of cold and light. Statues of snow foxes nodded their heads, and tiny ice chandeliers chimed lullabies. At the heart of the palace stood the Snow Queen, tall and gentle, her robe rippling like moonlight over a frozen lake. Her crown of icicles tickled the stars, and her eyes were kind, the sort of eyes that make you feel safe even when you're far from home. She bowed to Nia and invited the little explorers to a winter walk through the kingdom. The Snow Queen explained that every snowflake in her kingdom was a tiny story. She opened a little box and released dozens of twinkling snowflakes that danced like butterflies. Each one hummed a different tune and painted a tiny picture in the air. One showed a sled ride, another a laughing dog, another a warm kitchen where cookies waited. Nia reached out gently, and one snowflake landed on her mitten and told her a short, secret song. It sounded like bells wrapped in velvet, and Nia's heart felt full. They walked to a frozen river that sang as they slid across it like a music box. The ice made giggling notes beneath their skates, and Fenn did a little twirl that shook loose a flurry of glitter from his tail. Pippin joined them, rolling and tumbling, making snow angels that winked when the aurora traced them in color. The castle clapped with soft icicle sounds as the Snow Queen led a gentle dance, and even the lantern light in Lumi's glow stepped in time with their feet. Then, the Snow Queen lifted both hands, and the whole sky blossomed into a grand aurora. Bands of color braided around the moon and shimmered down like ribbons. The music swelled into a bright, laughing song, and every snowflake joined in, spinning and sparkling. Nia clasped Fenn's paw and felt the world turn round with gentle speed, like a carousel of light. The Snow Queen spun too, and her crown scattered starlight like confetti across the world. The moment was dazzling and warm all at once, so full of wonder that Nia could only clap and sing along. After the music slowed, the Snow Queen led them to a tiny table carved from moonbeam ice where a moonlit teacup waited. She poured something quiet and warm into it, the light of a soft moonbeam, and offered each of them a sip. It tasted like a hug and a bedtime story in one, cozy and safe and gently sweet. Nia licked her mitten with delight and felt warmth bloom across her fingers. The Snow Queen said, "Winter keeps many small, soft things, songs, stars, and hot sweet moon tea for sharing. But all nights have a homeward path, and Nia's porch window would be waiting." The Snow Queen smiled and touched Nia's scarf, pressing a tiny snowflake into its fabric. The snowflake settled and glowed as a pendant, soft as first breath and bright as a promise. "If you ever miss the music," the Queen said, "follow its little light and it will show you the way." Fenn curled up beside Nia, and Pippin gave a silly little honk, and everyone hugged her like a mitten made of friends. Back through the gate, the forest, and the porch Nia trotted, the pendant resting on her chest like a tiny glowing friend. The world outside seemed the same, but everything felt kinder. The crunch underfoot sang a little tune, and the stars winked like small mirrors of the aurora. Nia climbed back through her window, tucked the pendant beneath her pillow where moonbeams might visit, and hugged her scarf. Fen slipped a final paw print on the snow and promised he would watch the path until she returned. That night, Nia dreamed of silver gates and dancing snowflakes and the warm hum of the Snow Queen's music. When she woke, the pendant glowed softly, as if it had a tiny song stored inside just for her. She smiled into morning light and knew that any cold night could carry a warm adventure, and any quiet window might someday tap with a tiny tune. She put on her scarf and left a crumb of cookie on the sill for Pippin, in case he came to visit, and hummed the winter song all day. From then on, whenever the wind made chime-like noises or the moon leaned close, Nia would touch her pendant and whisper, "Hello." Sometimes a single twinkle snowflake friend would answer. Sometimes Fen would pad softly beneath her window, and sometimes the Snow Queen's music would float by on the air like a lullaby. Nia learned that magic was quietly patient and that kindness made cold places twinkle. She kept the pendant safe and saved her curiosity for the next time the world tapped her window. Sammy's Spectacular Circus Surprise. Sammy lived in a cozy oak tree at the edge of a small green yard. One sunny afternoon, while collecting shiny pebbles, Sammy spotted something different, glitter twinkling under a pile of autumn leaves. He brushed the leaves aside and found a tiny golden ticket with a little moon on it. The ticket smelled faintly of sugar and whispered of surprises. Sammy's nose wiggled with excitement. His little heart buzzed like a jar of busy bees. He tucked the ticket behind his ear and hurried to tell someone, imagining bright colors and music. Sammy scampered to his friend Millie's tiny doorway. Millie, the mouse, loved surprises and shiny things. When Sammy showed the ticket, Millie clapped her paws and blew a cheerful whistle that sounded like a bright bell. Together, they read the tiny letters, "Backyard Circus tonight. Bring friends." Millie's sparkly hat tipped jauntily as she imagined costumes and tiny drums. They hopped, twirled, and decided to invite everyone. They scribbled little notes and left them on the oak and the garden fence, their giggles echoing like tiny bells. Benny the bear cub found his invitation tucked under a pile of soft leaves. Benny loved balancing and big hugs, so he practiced wobbling on a log right away. Tilly, the stripy kitten, pounced into the garden chasing a bouncing balloon and squealed when she saw the paper. Ellie, the baby elephant, who lived near the pond, trumpeted softly and put on a flower garland. Professor Popcorn, the clever raccoon, polished his popcorn cart and tied a bow. Everyone buzzed with plans and promises, juggling, hoops, music, and a very special surprise. They worked all afternoon under a blue sky. Millie taught everyone how to bow like a tiny ringmaster, and Sammy helped hammer little wooden signs that read Sammy's Spectacular Circus. Benny practiced balancing cups and a tiny barrel, wobbling and tumbling into giggles. Tilly learned to jump through a bright ribbon hoop while batting a little drum. Ellie practiced a gentle trumpet that made butterflies flutter, and Professor Popcorn tested the popcorn maker, Pop. Pop, so sweet kernels danced in the air. They taped up ribbons and hung lanterns, tails and whiskers twitching with joy. As the sun lowered and painted the sky in pinks and purples, they set up a small red and yellow big top tent. It wasn't tall like circus tents in storybooks, but it shimmered with lanterns and made a cozy round stage. Balloons bobbed and a tiny drum sat by the entrance. Sammy tied the shiny ticket to a string and hung it above the door like a golden bell. Friends and neighbors, small hedgehogs, friendly robins, and curious frogs gathered on blankets. The yard hummed like a hive of happy sound and tiny applause. Rehearsal had hiccups. Benny tried to balance 3 juggling balls but sneezed. Balls flew like tiny planets. Tilly's hoop tangled in streamers, and Millie tripped on a ribbon while pretending to be very stately. Ellie sneezed confetti, which made everyone cough and then laugh until they cried little happy tears. Professor Popcorn saved the moment by tossing popcorn into the air like confetti, too. Sammy felt a tiny wobble of worry in his tummy. What if their show was too silly? What if no one clapped? Millie tapped her whistle and squeaked something encouraging. "Silly can be splendid," she said. The friends huddled and decided to make the silliness the show's secret sparkle. Sammy found his courage by imagining everyone giggling together. He drew a bright program with doodled stars and placed it by the entrance. They practiced again, slowly, with giggles between steps. Benny made a gentle wobble into a funny bow. Tilly's leaps turned into twirling dances. Slowly, the yard felt ready, like a big warm hug waiting under the tent. Night arrived, and the stars peeked out like tiny glitter stuck to the sky. Lanterns in the tent twinkled, and the little audience hushed with excitement. Sammy's paws trembled as he opened the show with a tiny tap-tap on the drum. Millie announced the acts in a squeaky, proud voice. Benny balanced and bowed, making everyone clap at his brave smile. Tilly leaped through bright hoops while confetti floated like sleepy snow. Ellie trumpeted softly, so the sound felt like a lullaby. Professor Popcorn sold handfuls of warm popcorn to squeals of delight. Then came the surprise, Sammy's favorite part. He had saved the shiny ticket for a special trick. "Close your eyes," he whispered to his friends. Everyone did. Sammy climbed a tiny ladder, tied the ticket to a string, and let it soar up into the tent roof. As the ticket fluttered, the lanterns blinked just so, and a soft moonbeam, like a silver ribbon, slipped through a gap in the tent, turning the ticket into a little shining star. The whole yard gasped and then shouted with glee. The moon itself seemed to clap its hands in twinkling applause. The giggles became a fine music of happy sounds. Sammy felt his tummy buzz into a warm, brave feeling. He led a tiny parade around the tent, Millie perched on a mini drum, Benny wobbling proudly, Tilly prancing, Ellie spraying a gentle confetti shower, and Professor Popcorn tossing popcorn like tiny stars. Neighbors cheered, frogs croaked funny rhythms, and the robins chimed in. The show didn't need perfect tricks, just bright hearts and friendly faces. Sammy's smile stretched wide as the moon shone, full and round, right over the tent. When the final bow came, everyone clapped and stamped little feet. Sammy took a tiny bow and felt proud like a balloon ready to float. Millie handed him back the golden ticket, and he kept it close to his heart. "Best surprise ever," Benny mumbled through a yawn. Tilly curled into a purring nap on a soft blanket. Ellie sighed a happy trumpet, petals from her garland drifting down. Professor Popcorn counted leftover kernels and winked. The lights dimmed slowly. The tent hummed like a happy bee nest, full of warm memories. After the circus, the friends snuggled under the stars on soft blankets. Sammy tucked the ticket in a tiny wooden box and put it on a shelf inside his oak tree. The box would be a memory keeper, a place for dreams and future surprises. Millie hummed a lullaby, Benny mumbled a gentle story about balancing on clouds, Tilly's whiskers twitched in sleep, and Ellie drifted into quiet trumpet snores. Professor Popcorn packed up his cart with a sleepy smile. The yard settled, full of friendly hush and the promise of tomorrow's play. In the morning, the yard smelled like warm popcorn and fresh day. Sammy peeked out and smiled at the wooden box. He knew the circus had been small but spectacular because everyone shared their best, sillies and all. He scampered to Millie to plan a new, tiny adventure, maybe a lemonade stand or a moonbeam picnic. The golden ticket rested safely, a twinkly promise that surprises were always just around the corner when friends worked together. Sammy skipped away, tail high, ready for the next sparkling idea. The magical door at midnight. Mia woke to a tiny knock, tap, tap, just when the clock whispered 12. She sat up in her cozy bed and blinked at the floor. There, tucked under the quilt and near her slippers, was a little wooden door no taller than her favorite storybook. It shimmered with a soft golden light and hummed like a lullaby. Mia smiled with the slow excitement of someone who knows a secret might be kind. She slipped on her fuzzy socks and whispered, "Hello." When the little door opened, a small head peeked out, Toby the turtle, eyes bright like green marbles, and a tiny lantern mouse with a glowing lamp. They bowed as if greeting a long-lost friend. "Would you like to visit the midnight market?" Toby asked in a voice that sounded like slow giggles. Mia's heart felt like a fluffy balloon. She nodded, tugging the quilt around her shoulders like a cape. The doorway smelled faintly of honey and the sea. Stepping through, Mia found a path of twinkling stones leading into a gentle night garden. Above, the crescent moon tilted like a friendly smile and sprinkled moonbeams that felt like soft ribbons. A star carpet waited, pillows of dandelion fluff tucked at its corners. Mia climbed aboard with one careful hop. Toby crawled beside her, tiny feet tapping. The lantern mouse lit the way. The path hummed under them, and Mia felt safe and brave in a new quiet world. They drifted toward the midnight market, where tents glowed like jellyfish and stalls sold music in jars. Friendly creatures strolled with pockets full of giggles. A baker sold warm cinnamon clouds, a painter sold pictures that hummed, and a seamstress stitched tiny dreams into mitten-sized pockets. Mia smelled sugar and willow smoke. Children of the night owl babies with sleepy eyes clapped and waved as the star carpet floated over the smiling crowd. Everything sparkled kindly. At the Moonlight stall, Mia met the crescent moon's own helper, who offered small moonbeams bundled like ribbons. "Take one to share a smile," the helper whispered. Mia unwrapped a silver ribbon and felt it giggle in her hand. She looped a moonbeam into her hair and it warmed her like a soft blanket. The lantern mouse's whiskers twitched. Toby's shell glowed brighter. Mia promised to use the moonbeam to help anyone who looked a little dim. Soon they sailed on a fluffy dandelion float through a stream of giggling clouds. Puffy cloud kites waved hello as they passed. Fireflies played hide-and-seek among the petals of the sky, and each tiny light left a soft print as if someone had stamped glow on the air. Mia and Toby reached out to touch the prints, and each touch made a gentle bell sound. They laughed until their chests felt like soft springs of joy. In a shadowed nook by a willow stall, they found a little grumpy shadow who had lost its smile. It shuffled and sighed like a lost hat. The shadow was soft and small, but hollow where cheer should be. Other visitors passed carefully, not knowing how to help. Mia knelt and touched the shadow's hand. She unwrapped her moonbeam ribbon and tied it into a tiny bow. The moonbeams tickled, and the shadow tried a smile. It trembled, then bubbled into a bright grin. The newly smiling shadow joined a small parade led by sleepy owls tapping leaf drums. Toby marched with a tiny leaf drum too, his shell gleaming like polished green glass. Mia clapped in time and stomped one soft slipper. Beat, beat, hush, and the crowd hummed along. The parade tucked the happy shadow into a pocket of laughter, and the market swelled with giggles like warm soup. Mia felt proud and sleepy in a comfortable, helpful way. The moon whispered that dawn would be near and that star carpets prefer to rest before morning birds wake. Mia's heart gave a little skip. She didn't want the night to end, but she knew home waited too. The moon handed Mia a small bell that sounded like a giggle and a paper map woven from stardust. "For kind footsteps and brave pockets," the moon said with a wink. Mia tucked the gifts safely into her pajamas pocket. On the way back, the market hummed a slow lullaby. People yawned and tents lowered like sleepy heads. The star carpet drifted through the twinkling stone path toward the tiny door beneath Mia's bed. The lantern mouse curled into a nap on Mia's shoulder, and Toby yawned a turtle-sized yawn that sounded like a tiny tide. Mia pressed the little bell once. It chimed with a soft giggle that seemed to tuck the world into a blanket. Back in her bedroom, the tiny door closed with a kissing click and left a sprinkle of moon dust on Mia's pillow. She climbed under the quilt, the star map warm in her pocket and the giggling bell tucked by her hand. Toby curled up like a small green pebble on the quilt edge, and the lantern mouse found a corner of the sock drawer to keep watch. Outside the window, the sky blushed faintly as dawn yawned, but the room stayed cozy and bright with moon crumbs. Mia hugged her new map and bell and whispered thank you to the small night friends. She promised to return when the door sang again. The lantern mouse squeaked a tiny good night, and Toby blinked slow, turtle-sure. Mia closed her eyes and felt the moonbeam ribbon like a warm hug. In dreams, she floated back to the market where she helped others and laughed with clouds. The house kept its secret, and the little door waited, patient as sleep. Outside, the crescent moon dipped behind cottony clouds and the sky grew paler, but the tiny door at the foot of Mia's bed kept a faint twinkle like a secret smile. As Mia's breathing softened into sleep, a tiny knock, tap, tap, no louder than a kitten's paw, sounded once more and then faded. The night had been full of new friends, small brave moments, and shiny little gifts of kindness. Mia slept, dreaming of moonbeams, sure that adventures would come back again. Bella and the Moonlight Balloon Ride. Bella brushed her teeth, put on blue pajamas, and hugged her patched teddy tight. Outside her moon-shaped window, a soft silver glow winked. Bella rubbed her eyes and tiptoed closer. There, tied to the garden fence, floated a big round balloon that looked exactly like the moon. It shimmered with tiny stars. Bella giggled. She had never seen a moon that came all the way down to visit. The night smelled of warm apples and sleepy grass. The balloon whispered in a voice like soft chiming bells, "Would you like to come for a tiny ride?" Bella's eyes grew round and bright. She climbed down the garden path, Teddy tucked under her arm. A friendly little moon face named Luna floated beside the balloon and waved. Luna hummed a lullaby that made the leaves sway like sleepier hands. Bella nodded, and the wicker basket waited with a ribbon bow. The balloon smelled faintly of starlight and lemon cookies. The basket rose slowly, like a sleepy feather letting go. Bella felt her toes tingle. Down below, her little red-doored house waved its curtains. Up, the sky tucked itself in with clouds like cotton blankets. Luna pointed with a tiny crescent finger and whispered stories about twinkling friends. The fireflies blinked hello and lit a tiny path through the night. Bella waved to the house and felt brave and small all at once. Teddy snuggled closer, as if listening. They floated past sleepy trees where an owl with round glasses blinked and hooted a friendly hello. "Good evening," the owl said, sounding like a page turning. He offered a tiny feather for balance, just in case. Bella thanked him with a polite curtsy, and the owl winked. The fireflies danced in a gentle ring, as if clapping. A silver cloud below became a soft seat, and Bella set Teddy down to wave at the twinkling lights. The world sounded like a soft song. Luna pointed to a string of tiny stars that twinkled like hopping beetles. "They sing when you listen," Luna said. Bella pressed her ear to the cool night and heard soft jingles that made her toes wiggle. The stars hummed a lullaby about moonbeams and marshmallows. Little star shapes winked and drifted close, making silly patterns that looked like dancing socks and laughing moons. Bella giggled so much she nearly dropped Teddy, but the basket kept them snug and safe. They landed on a cloud cushion as fluffy as freshly baked bread. Bella clapped her hands and jumped a little, finding the cloud a perfect pillow. The fireflies made a tiny campfire of light while Luna told a quiet story about a moon who learned to paint shadows. Bella shared a crumb of pretend cookie with Teddy. Even the clouds seemed to hug the basket. The night felt like a hug you could float inside, warm, safe, and snugly wrapped in silver blue cotton. Suddenly, a breeze whooshed by with playful fingers and the balloon bobbed like a small boat on gentle waves. Bella's heart did a funny flip. "Hold on," Luna hummed, steady and warm. The fireflies blinked faster, as if cheering. Bella hugged Teddy extra tight and felt the basket sway, but the moonlight balloon hummed steady like a lullaby. The owl below watched with wise eyes. Bella practiced a brave breath, one slow in, one slow out, and the whoosh turned into a ticklish giggle. A tiny gust gusted again, a little stronger, and the basket dipped toward a silver cloud valley. Bella's tummy fluttered like a jar of butterflies. "We can sing to steady the sky," Luna suggested with a sparkle. Bella sang a silly song about socks on the moon while Teddy hummed in his soft, bare way. The stars joined in with twinkly beeps, and the owl added a gentle hoot. The balloon steadied. Bella realized that singing with friends made big feelings shrink like tiny paper boats. Higher and higher they floated again, toward a ring of dancing stars that shaped themselves into a smiling playground. Bella squealed with delight as tiny star children spun like pinwheels. Luna taught Bella a star handshake that felt like warm tinsel. Bella felt brave and bright, and Teddy felt brave too. They hopped from one glowing pebble of light to another, counting in whispers. The night air smelled like vanilla and rainbows. Bella felt like the tallest small person in the whole wide sky. The moon itself leaned close and whispered secrets of the sky, stories about sleepy seas and marching comets. Luna hummed them back in a melody Bella could almost taste. Bella listened with wide eyes, and a tiny bead of wonder ran down her cheek, like a morning dew. She learned that the moon loved to visit small children who kept brave, kind hearts. Bella promised quietly to always remember how the sky felt. The balloon rocked gently, as if nodding in agreement. Just as Bella thought the night couldn't feel any more magical, the wind sang louder and swirled a little faster. The basket spun a tiny turn and Bella laughed, surprised and brave. "Hold my paw," Teddy seemed to say. Bella took Daddy Bear grip on the basket rope and Luna wrapped a ribbon of moonlight around the tether. The owl called encouragement from below. The gust was big but friendly, like a playful giant. Bella shouted with joy as they zoomed through a silver hoop of cloud. They soared past a sleepy comet who nodded politely and waved its tail like a ribbon. Bella felt a whoop of bravery inside her chest and knew she could do anything, even when the sky surprised her. The moonlight balloon hummed a steady, warm tune that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The stars around them blinked in rhythmic patterns, like a friendly drumbeat. Bella closed her eyes and hummed back, feeling the song wrap around her like a cozy scarf. She was home in the sky. As the night grew quieter, the balloon turned homeward, guided by a tiny tug from Luna. Bella peered down and saw her house like a toy, curtains waving goodnight. The basket drifted lower, and the cloud blankets folded up behind like tidy sleeping quilts. The fireflies lit the path all the way to Bella's garden gate. Bella thought of the owl, the singing stars, and the giggling gust. She yawned a velvet yawn, and Teddy yawned back with the comfiest stuffed mouth. Back at her window, Bella climbed down the garden path with the basket safely touching the grass. The moonlight balloon gave a gentle wink, and Luna pressed a tiny moonbeam into Bella's palm as a promise to visit again. Bella tucked Teddy under her arm and walked inside, her slippers making quiet pats on the floor. Her house smelled like honey toast. The balloon floated up again, waving goodbye with its ribbons. Bella waved until the moon was a small silver speck smiling high above. Bella climbed into bed and placed the moonbeam on her bedside table. It glowed softly, a little nightlight that smelled of moon mint. She hugged Teddy, who seemed a bit braver now. Her eyes grew heavy like soft curtains. From outside, Luna hummed the last line of their song, and the stars replied with tiny wink bursts. Bella smiled in her sleep before she even fell completely, and in her dreams she rode the silver balloon again, this time with all her new friends waving hello. Morning painted the curtains with pale sun, and Bella woke with a good sleepy stretch and a memory that felt like a warm blanket. On the table, the moonbeam had dimmed to a cozy glow, a tiny treasure. Bella whispered, "Thank you" to the window and to the day. She knew the balloon would visit again, because the sky keeps its promises to kind, brave hearts. Teddy winked his stitched smile, and Bella decided that every night could hold a little adventure if you listened closely. That night, Bella left the window slightly open and a single ribbon from the garden fence fluttered in, like a tiny hello. She fell asleep humming the Star Handshake song and dreamed of moonlit playgrounds, singing comets, and an owl who told wise jokes. She slept curled like a tiny crescent, and if you looked out very, very quietly, you might see a small silver wink high above, as if Luna was peeking in to check on her. Bella smiled in her sleep and hugged the world a little closer. The Magic Show of Professor Whimsy. Under a stripy red and gold tent, evening hummed with small lights. A sign rocked gently, Professor Whimsy, Magic and Wonder. Professor Whimsy tiptoed in, hat tall, coat bright, shoes that made a soft click. He breathed in the warm tent smell of straw and honey and set his shiny wand on a little table. Outside, tiny feet and soft paws gathered. The tent flap opened like a friendly mouth, inviting everyone to come close and watch the gentle show begin. First came Leela with braids and bright dress, eyes like two big moons. She giggled and clasped her hands. Then Buttons the rabbit hopped in, floppy ears bouncing, nose wiggling, bow tie a splash of stripes. Mr. Bumble padded slowly, like a little drum, honey on his nose from a tiny snack. Children and grown-ups settled onto cushions. A hush that was more happy than quiet fell over the tent, the kind of hush where every little sound feels like a secret. Professor Whimsy bowed with a grand little flourish. He tapped his shining wand on the table and tiny pinches of light jumped up, tittle tittle. The lights turned into sleepy stars that danced above the crowd. Sparkle the balloon floated forward, twinkling dots along its shiny blue skin. Everyone clapped very softly, like pats on a pillow. The professor whispered a little rhyme, and the stars shuffled, as if they were listening and very pleased to be part of the show. For the first trick, the professor tapped his hat with the glowing wand. From the hat popped a ribbon, then another, then a whole rainbow of scarves, each soft as a cloud. Leela laughed and wrapped one scarf gently around her shoulders. Buttons hopped around the scarves like a tiny king. The scarves made soft swoosh swoosh sounds as they flew. Little hands reached for color, and the tent smelled faintly of sugar and giggles, as if magic could be smelled and tasted. Then the professor said, very softly, that the hat liked to play hide-and-seek. He asked for a helper. Buttons the rabbit wiggled his nose and hopped right into the hat, ears flopping. The hat made a tiny sigh and grew warm and snug. The children leaned in, breaths held like tiny little birds. The hat looked plain on the outside, but inside, perhaps, there was a very small, very warm world where hops and soft paws could hide for a moment. Professor Whimsy waved his wand in a sweet, slow way. Out of the hat came not only buttons, but a cascade of tiny paper moons, each one twinkling. The moons sailed like little boats, and the friendly moon at the tent flap winked back. Mr. Bumble hummed a tiny tune that sounded like a rocking boat. Everyone laughed softly as the moons landed on shoulders and heads, and Buttons shook himself and gave his bow tie a proud little toss. The professor whispered that now was a quiet trick, a trick for listening. He tapped the wand on the floor, and the tent lights answered with tiny bells. Sparkle the balloon hummed like a tiny bell too, its ribbon singing a little melody. Leela closed her eyes and smiled, listening to the lights and the balloon and the gentle hum of the tent. Even the straw seemed to hush, and the stars above made a soft, sleepy rhythm. Then Professor Whimsy stood very tall and said, with a smile as wide as a moon, that a big surprise would come. He placed the magic top hat on a stool and tapped it 3 times. A hush bigger than the first hush spread through the tent. Even the friendly moon leaned closer. Buttons hopped on a cushion and wiggled his nose. Hearts beat quick but soft. The professor lifted his wand and asked everyone to clap, a gentle drum for the big moment. Now for a trick that made bellies tipple with wonder, the vanish and appear. The professor said the word softly, and the hat shimmered as if it were breathing. With a puff that smelled of honey and peppermint, the hat seemed to swallow a tiny sound. Buttons gave one last excited hop, then the hat looked empty. The crowd blinked and leaned forward. Was Buttons gone? A tiny hush turned to a whisper that sounded like a question floating up to the stars. Suddenly the hat popped. Out flew a flurry of confetti moons and tiny sparkles like bouncing peas. A bright little parade of stars tumbled out, giggling in their own little way. Sparkle the balloon drifted through the parade, chuckling softly. Then, with a triumphant drum roll that Mr. Bumble hummed right on cue, Buttons popped out perched on Sparkle's ribbon, waving one tiny paw. The tent exploded into a happy, soft cheer that sounded like clapping clouds. Children laughed until cheeks were round and eyes shone. Leela jumped up and gave Buttons a soft hug. Professor Whimsy took a grand bow and tipped his hat until a shy feather floated out and landed on his shoulder. Everyone clapped and clapped, some on laps, some on tiny palms. Mr. Bumble offered honey cakes from a basket, sweet and small, and the tent smelled like sticky smiles. The night felt like a warm blanket wrapped in giggles. As the show slowed, the friendly moon edged the tent flap open wider and sprinkled tiny stardust down like soft sugar. The professor waved his wand gently, and the stars folded themselves into pockets of light to take home in memories. Sparkle the balloon drifted up and brushed the roof as if tucking the tent in. Little yawns began to bloom like tiny flowers. The professor whispered thank you and good night, a ribbon of words soft as a lullaby. Outside, families wandered home under the smiling moon, carrying pockets of stardust and warm giggles. Leela hugged her scarf and found her shoes, Buttons tucked into a cozy basket with his striped bow tie neat, and Mr. Bumble hummed a honey lullaby to himself. Professor Whimsy folded his tent with careful hands and watched as every little light blinked goodnight. He waved a small hand and filled a jar with the last brave star for himself. That night, Leela curled into bed with a scarf around her shoulders and a tiny paper moon on her pillow. She thought of stars that danced and a hat that could hold surprises. Buttons dreamed of soft hats and ribbon bridges. Mr. Bumble dreamed of honey trees. Even the friendly moon hummed a sleepy tune. If you listened very closely, you could hear the tent whisper that magic lives in small, kind things and in the warm hands that share them. Professor Whimsy walked home under the moon, hat tucked under one arm and wand glowing like a little friendly firefly. He hummed a soft tune and thought of next night's show, of new scarves and quieter tricks. He folded a small star into his pocket for a rainy day and winked at the friendly moon. The world felt very big and also very small, and the professor smiled because in that hug between, magic felt easy and very true. Some nights, if you pass the stripy tent and press your ear to the soft wall, You can still hear a little rattle of scarves and the faint hum of a lullaby. Magic, the professor says, is a pocket of warm light that lives where friends laugh and hands are kind. The tent sleeps, the moon watches, and a balloon drifts in dreams. The end of one wonderful show is simply the beginning of the next small, shining surprise. Little Bear's Big Winter Adventure. Little Bear woke to a hush. The world outside his window was white and quiet, as if someone had painted the ground with milk. He pressed his nose to the glass and watched tiny snowflakes tumble from the sky, each one winking in the morning light. His heart did a happy hop. Today would be a big winter day, he decided. He could feel adventure rustling like the scarf his mother kept near the door. Little Bear put on his boots and padded outside, where every twig and rock wore a glittering hat of snow. He wrapped the red scarf snug around his neck, its bright color like a little flag against the white. Little Bear took 3 big breaths of cold, sweet air and imagined the wishes he would make on each snowflake. He thought of crunchy footprints, sliding down gentle hills, and building a new friend from snow. The trees were tall and hushed. Each evergreen wore its best snowy coat. Little Bear hummed a happy tune, ready to find friends and make the hill ring with laughter. Outside, the path crunched under his paws and a tiny blue blur fluttered above his shoulder. Bluebird landed with a ruffle and chirped a bright hello. Little Bear smiled and offered a crumb of his breakfast bread, which Bluebird pecked with quick, happy beeps. Together, they scouted the yard. Bluebird pointed with a bob to a sweet little hollow where a pinecone lay. They set off, Little Bear's boots making soft thumps and Bluebird singing a tinkly tune, the snow sparkling like a million tiny mirrors. Not far away, Snowy Fox was busy patting small snow lumps into shape. When Little Bear arrived, Snowy Fox tossed a soft snowball and giggled. The 3 friends worked side by side, stacking fluffy rounds and packing them carefully to make a snow bear with button eyes and a twig smile. Bluebird chose a shiny pebble for a nose. Little Bear's laughter made puffs in the air, and Snowy Fox's tail made gentle swirls in the snow. The new snow bear seemed to grin right back at them. Then, tucked beneath an evergreen branch, they found a small wooden sled with a playful stripe. It shone like a promise. Little Bear's paws tingled with excitement. Snowy Fox hopped on and let out a happy yip. Bluebird fluttered above, and Little Bear pushed with all his might. The sled slid and sang over the snow, carrying them toward the top of a friendly hill. They climbed and scrambled and wiggled into place, ready to whoosh. The hill seemed to lean in, eager to send them down. Away they went. The sled whooshed like wind through laundry, and laughter bubbled out of each of them. Snow sprayed like confetti, and for a wild, wonderful second, the whole world tasted only of speed and joy. Little Bear felt his tummy flip in the best possible way. At the bottom of the hill, they tumbled into a snowdrift in a flurry of giggles and soft snorts. They scrambled up, cheeks bright and eyes sparkling, and decided to climb again for another run and another round of happy whoops. After a few slides, Little Bear noticed a single sparkling snowflake twirling differently from the rest. It spun in circles like a tiny dancer and seemed to glow with its own soft light. Curious, Little Bear reached a paw and followed it as it drifted away, twirling past icicles and over frosted branches. Bluebird flitted after for a moment, but the snowflake's gentle path led Little Bear farther than he meant to go. He did not yet know he was wandering away from the friends who laughed on the hill. The snowflake guided him past a row of tall evergreens until the hill looked small behind him. Little Bear blinked and realized the sounds of sliding and laughter were very faint now. The wind sounded different here, whispering through branches and making long, quiet sighs. He paused, and his brave heart felt a tiny wobble. The sky seemed very wide. Little Bear called softly, "Snowy fox, bluebird." His voice puffed like a little thought in the cold air, and the forest answered only with soft echoes. Just then, a small, worried sound drifted from a hollow under a tree. Little Bear leaned closer and found Snowy Fox's paw caught beneath a drift of soft snow. Snowy Fox's ears peeped out, eyes wide and a little scared. Bluebird hovered nearby, fluttering fast but too small to push. Little Bear's worry changed into a steady, determined warmth. He remembered how Mama Bear bandaged tiny scrapes and how the red scarf could tie things together. Little Bear knew it was time to help a friend. With careful paws, Little Bear used the sled as a little shovel, scraping away at the drift. Snow flew, and his breath puffed like small clouds. Snowy Fox squeezed a paw free and gave a tiny yelp, then wriggled out with a triumphant hop. Bluebird cheered with a tiny chirpy song. They hugged, all three squishy and giggling, a warm bundle of fur and feathers. Little Bear felt proud and strong, like a moonbeam that had found its way through clouds to help a friend. They all walked back together, the hill welcoming them home like an old friend. In the distance, a gentle lantern glow bobbed. Mama Bear stood at the path with open arms, her smile wrapping around them like the coziest blanket. She led them to the little cabin where steaming cups waited, the scent of cocoa and warm bread filling the air. They talked about the snow bear, the bright sled, and the twirling snowflake, and how Little Bear had been brave and kind. Mama Bear tucked the red scarf into a safe place. That night, Little Bear snuggled into his bed with the red scarf folded on the chair and the window showing a quiet sky. Snowflakes drifted like sleepy dancers outside, each one a tiny secret. He yawned a big, satisfied yawn and thought of the day's sliding, the snow bear's crooked twig smile, and the sparkle that had led him to help a friend. He felt sleepy and full of gentle pride. Mama Bear kissed his forehead, the lantern hummed low, and Little Bear fell asleep dreaming of snowflake dances and tomorrow's small, bright adventures. The magical school bus ride. It was a bright morning with giggles in the air. Miss Luna stood by the gate, humming a gentle tune that made the leaves sway like tiny hands. The playground buzzed when a golden hum grew louder and the magical school bus rolled up on tiny wings. Its grill smiled like a friendly face and its windows winked. Mia clutched her sparkly red backpack, Ben straightened his button hat, and Kiko, the little green frog, hopped 3 excited hops. The bus door opened with a puff of warm cinnamon air, inviting everyone inside. Inside, the bus smelled like warm toast and starlight. The seats were soft and plump like marshmallows, and the windows stretched to show a sky that seemed to be waiting. Miss Luna gave each child a tiny rainbow ticket that shimmered when they touched it. The bus rumbled, then tickled, then popped, as if it couldn't hold in its excitement. A gentle bell rang, and the starlight whistle gleamed on Miss Luna's pocket. Mia peeked at her rainbow ticket, and it winked back with colors that giggled. The sparkle map lay on the front seat and unfurled like a sleepy cat. It glowed soft turquoise, then pink, and whispered tiny notes when someone hummed. Ben leaned closer, his tin telescope dangling from its strap, and the map folded a corner toward a route-marked cloud garden. Miss Luna smiled and said, "Hold hands if you'd like to explore. The bus will listen to quiet wishes." So they held hands, warm and small, and the bus hummed a tune like a lullaby, lifting gently above the rooftops. Up, up they floated past rooftops, past park swings, and over the sleepy bakery where crumbs smelled like stories. The city beneath looked like a toy set. Little cars tooted politely and trees waved their leafy arms. Outside the window, a flock of paper birds unfolded into real birds and tipped tiny hats. The magical school bus whispered, "Watch the sky," and clouds began to gather like cotton castles. Kiko clapped his tiny frog hands while Mia pointed, eyes wide with the kind of wonder that made the world feel new again. They reached the cloud garden, where clouds bloomed like flowers and dripped silver petals that tasted faintly of lemonade. Little cloud rabbits bounced along paths of fluff, and tiny rainbows hummed like tuneful bees. The sparkle map shimmered and drew a glowing line to a pulsing, pearly gate. "Let's be gentle," Miss Luna whispered. "Clouds are soft and sleepy." Ben touched a cloud petal, and it sang a tiny note. The children giggled as starlight fell like sprinkles, and the bus settled on a fluffy path made just for them. As they wandered, a soft sound hummed from deep in the garden, a low, whale-like song that made the clouds sway. A gentle star whale rose from a cloud pool, scales shimmering like sequins and blinked slow, kind eyes. It misted tiny stars that smelled like cookies and safety. The star whale had a small bell tangled in its fin, and it seemed sad because the bell could not ring. "Maybe it needs a friend to learn the right note," Miss Luna said. The children felt a little flutter of helpfulness in their chests. The sparkle map flashed a blue melodious line, and the starlight whistle twinkled with hopeful light. Ben took out his tin telescope like a careful tool. Mia hummed a tiny tune from her rainbow ticket, and Kiko croaked 3 small notes just to try. The map brightened as they sang together, Mia's tune, Ben's careful counting, Kiko's funny croak, until the bell on the whale jingled a soft, happy chime. The whale shimmered with delight, and the whole garden echoed with a gentle ringing like distant laughter. Suddenly, a fluttering of tiny silver leaves swirled around the bus, and the sparkle map blinked one color too many. A little gust had blown a page free, a tiny map corner that held the way home. "Oh," breathed Mia, and they all looked where the page danced toward the melting sun. Miss Luna whispered, "We can follow our hearts when maps wiggle, but let's be clever and patient." They tied a string to the bus bumper and to a cloud hook so the drifting map page would not float too far away. The bus hummed a slow-thinking song and took a gentle curve toward a tiny planet hanging low in the sky, Puddle Planet, where the lost things like to drift. They landed softly on a mirror pond and tiptoed across stepping stones that giggled underfoot. Little puddlefish lifted the map page on their fins and handed it back with a bow. "Thank you," said Ben, clapping. The children learned how sometimes you must go a new way to find a familiar thing. The bus honored the lesson with a proud, purring rumble. With the map whole again, the route home shimmered like a ribbon of moonlight. The bus opened its wings wide, and the sky felt gentle, like a breath. Along the way, they passed a parade of firefly lanterns that bobbed in time to Miss Luna's humming. Each child closed their eyes for a moment and made a tiny wish, one for a friend, one for a new song, one for a cozy nap. The bus gathered those wishes like warm mittens and tucked them into its heart so they would glow forever. As the sun began to yawn, little yawns spread through the bus like soft ripples. The cloud blanket floated down from a shelf and wrapped itself gently around sleepy knees and frog toes. Miss Luna told a slow, shining story about small stars who like to hide in cups of tea, and the children listened with half-closed eyes. The bus folded its wings like a parent tucking in a quilt, and the city below hummed its bedtime tune. Their school gate came into view like the smile of a waiting friend. They stepped out with sleepy laughter and a pocket full of tiny wonders. A starlight ring that tickled Ben's finger, a sprinkle of cloud dust that made Mia's hair smell like lemon cake, and a promise from Kiko that he'd teach everyone a frog hop dance. The bus leaned in for a last friendly nuzzle, its grill smiling a slow goodnight. Miss Luna tucked the sparkle map away and said, "Remember, magic grows when you share it." The children waved their rainbow tickets with sleepy hands, each ticket winking good night. At home, under blankets and moonbeams, each child dreamed gentle dreams of cloud gardens and singing whales. In their rooms, the sparkle map kept one tiny glow over their pillows like a nightlight, and the rainbow ticket rested on the bedside table ready for another day. Miss Luna hummed as she walked home, her little whistle chiming about tomorrow's plans. Outside, the magical school bus folded its wings and folded its smile, happy and ready to sleep until the next morning called it out to play. If you listen closely on a quiet morning, you might hear a tiny bell and a whisper of wings, proof that the magical school bus still remembers the names of friends and the songs they sang. Some days it will stop just outside the gate, waiting with cinnamon-scented breath, ready for new hands to hold and new wishes to tuck inside its heart. Miss Luna will be there, humming a tune that makes the leaves clap, and Kiko will leap high and say, "Are you ready?" The world will answer with a bright yes. The King Who Couldn't Stop Laughing. Once upon a sunny morning in the little kingdom of Tickleton, the sun smiled and the breeze played hopscotch across the flags. At the top of the tall, honey-colored castle lived King Laugh. He loved to laugh. His laugh began as a gentle chime, like soft bells, and it filled the rooms. The servants would smile and the cooks would hum. Children peeked from windows and clapped. Everyone liked the king's laughter because it sounded like warm oatmeal and bright marbles. One day, the king's laugh grew a little louder. It rolled down the stairway, bounced off the tapestries, and tickled the armor. The armor soldiers giggled so hard their helmets wobbled. The royal baker dropped a tray of sticky honey buns and laughed as the buns stuck to his nose. Even the castle cat tried to purr in laughing rhythm. Each laugh made another laugh bounce back, and soon the halls were full of happy, hiccupy sounds. The jester, Jumpy Jester, loved jokes and tried new tricks to giggle the king more. He juggled tiny teacups and told fluffy tickle rhymes. The king laughed so much that his chair hummed, but something surprising happened. The garden outside began to giggle too. Flowers swayed and made tiny chuckles. Butterflies fluttered in funny circles. Birds turned their heads and twittered like they were telling jokes of their own. Laughter had crossed the castle walls into the wide, green world. Queen Myra brought a silver teacup and smiled softly as she watched the kingdom ripple with laughter. She brewed a tiny cup of calming mint for the king, hoping he might rest between chuckles. The cup smelled like sleepy leaves. The king took a sip and let out a small, tinkly giggle that sounded like a bell. Yet the giggle grew back into a bigger one, as if a little spark lived under his crown and tickled him from inside. Court Mouse Mary, small and brave, scurried through the castle, following the sound of laughter like a ribbon. She wore a tiny blue scarf and peeped under rugs and behind curtains. Mary heard a faint shimmy under the throne. She found a little pebble that shimmered like a sunbeam trapped in glass. When she tapped it, the pebble gave a playful tinkle. Mary thought the pebble might be a giggle stone, a tiny laugh seed, and she tucked it in her pocket to show the queen. Word traveled fast to the townsfolk. People brought tickle toys, feather hats, and silly songs to the castle, hoping to join the laughter. Even the baker's dog learned to woof in rhythm. The laughing bell in the courtyard, old and polished, rang soft giggles when birds brushed its rope. The kingdom filled with a marvelous, noisy joy. But soon, giggles tucked inside hiccups. Hiccups grew into rolling guffaws, and the giggles began to tumble out of control like a tumble of bright marbles. At lunchtime, the laughter made the plates clink, and the stew spilled tiny giggles into the bowls. The children bounced with each chuckle and accidentally hopped like frogs. A small pond nearby began to giggle too, making fish flip in merry circles. People found it hard to speak because a funny hiccup of laughter popped in after every sentence. The mayor tried to make a serious face, but his chin wobbled and the whole room went peal after peal of laughter again. The kingdom loved laughter, yet now it grew too big to tuck away. Bells chimed giggles that rolled down hills and tickled the sleepy cows. The mill's sails hummed in laughter, and the bread rose in puffy giggles. Some people wanted quiet to nap and to hear the whisper of the wind. They wished for a gentle lullaby to soften the laughing waves. Queen Myra gently suggested a quiet game they could all play together to help the kingdom breathe and listen. The queen taught everyone a simple game called Hold Then Share. First, everyone took a deep, soft breath and held the laugh like a little balloon. Then they let it out with a gentle puff that turned into a shared giggle. Children practiced, and the mayor managed a tiny, quiet smile without bursting. The game made space for the laughter and room for calm. The kingdom learned how to wrap a laugh like a warm blanket and then tuck it in so others could sleep. But the tiny pebble in Mouse Mary's pocket still shimmered. One starry evening, when the moon told a sleepy story, the pebble sneezed a little sparkle and popped right out. It floated up like a firefly and landed on the king's ruby at the crown's tip. A bright, bubbly laugh puffed out, louder than before. The castle began to tremble with a giggle burst so big that curtains danced and cups did a little cha-cha on saucers. The whole kingdom felt like it was on a laughter carousel. This time the laugh was a laugh storm. Giggles thundered in peals and peals like a merry storm cloud. Trees shook tiny chuckling leaves, and the sea nearby patted the shore in rhythm. The jester somersaulted and made funny faces that only made the storm giggle louder. The kingdom whooped and woo-hooed until their tummies ached with joy. It was the biggest, silliest noise Tickleton had ever heard, and it felt like everyone's toes were laughing too. At the very loudest moment, the moon stepped closer and blinked kindly at the kingdom. Her voice was soft as spilled milk, and she hummed a lullaby. The sound slipped through the laugh storm like a gentle finger and touched the pebble on the crown. The pebble sighed and glowed. King Laugh felt the laughter settle like soft feathers. He learned, in a hush wrapped by moonlight, how to hold a laugh in his hands and let it go like a tiny, pleased bird. The next morning, the kingdom woke to gentle giggles and warm yawns. People remembered the hold then share game and practiced with their friends. The king would laugh at the funny parts of his day and then breathe the rest away. Jumpy Jester learned a quiet joke that made only 2 people giggle so they could save it for bedtime. Court Mouse Miri kept the pebble safe in a tiny velvet pouch so it could sparkle sometimes, but not take over the day. From then on, Tickleton found a new kind of happy. There were loud laughter parades and quiet, giggly story times. The Garden of Giggles would chuckle with visitors and then settle into gentle sways. The laughing bell rang soft notes to remind folks to play the hold then share game. People brought silly hats and soft pillows to town festivals, and the king led the parades with a smile that could be big or small, whichever the moment needed. At bedtime, the king would sit by the window and the queen would cup his hand. Sometimes he told a tiny joke and they both laughed like little marbles. Sometimes they listened to the moon and didn't laugh at all. Court Mouse Miri curled in the pocket of his robe and sometimes sneezed a spark that made them smile in the dark. The kingdom slept, dreaming of gentle chuckles, and the castle hummed a soft little tune that sounded like the king's breathing. Children in Tickleton learned that laughter is like a kite. It flies highest when you share the string. They learned to tickle each other gently, to giggle and to hush, to be loud in play and soft when someone needed a nap. The king taught them to be proud of a giggle and brave enough to whisper a laugh away when it was time. The kingdom kept its sparkly joy, but it learned to wrap it in a kind, careful hug. And so King Laugh kept laughing, but now he laughed for the right moments and shared his laughter like warm cookies. Sometimes, on a very silly afternoon, he would laugh until his crown tipped sideways and the whole castle tittered. The kingdom would clap and join in, then settle down with a happy hush. Tickleton became famous for its kind, clever laughter that could cheer a friend or calm a child, and that made the king smile and then laugh a soft, proud laugh. The Boy Who Spoke to Wolves. Every night when the sky turned soft and the stars blinked awake, Milo would sneak to the edge of the forest. He pulled his red scarf tight and listened. Sometimes the owls went hoot, and sometimes the tall pines sighed. But once, on a night full of silver light, Milo heard something else, a long, low, friendly voice, like wind in fur. The voice said, very simply, "Hello." Milo whispered back, surprised that his voice could find the wolf words. The voice belonged to Silver Wolf, who stepped from between 2 birches, fur rhymed with starlight. He was not scary. He was like a tall, kind shadow with eyes full of moons. Milo remembered the stories people whispered by their hearth about wolves, but his heart felt only warm curiosity. "Can you speak wolf?" Silver Wolf asked. Milo giggled. "I can try," he said, and the forest listened as a small boy and a big wolf found one new, quiet language. They sat close together on a ring of soft moss. Milo learned how the wolves hummed with short breaths and how their tails made little drum beats on the ground. Silver Wolf taught him a gentle word for friend that sounded like a wind bell. Milo tried it until his tongue felt funny, and then they both laughed, wolf laughter and boy laughter slipping into the trees. Night seemed to hold its breath, listening to the two new friends share stories. Soon the pack came. Wolves of every quiet gray and silver padded out like a slow, soft wind. A little pup tumbled in last, ears too big and eyes like warm tea. He bumped into Milo's knee and braved a shy nudge. The pup's name was Pebble because he loved to bat tiny stones across the stream. But on this night, Pebble trembled. His paw was muddy, and he kept looking past the trees toward the dark hill where Moonlight sat thin and worried. Silver Wolf lowered his head close to the boy. "Pebble misses his home den," he said in the hush of the trees. "And the moonstone is dim tonight. The night feels small without the stone's glow." Milo felt his heart push like a small bird. "I will help," he said. The wolves tilted their ears and the owls blinked as if to say, "Yes, please." So Milo put on his red scarf and followed the pack deeper where the path smelled of fern and stories. They walked through a corridor of trees that hummed with sleeping beetles and hidden crickets. Old Owl flew ahead and blinked his round golden eyes to guide them through safe branches. Milo's boots tapped soft moss, and the pack's paws made a gentle rhythm. Every so often, Silver Wolf would press his nose to the ground and point his ears to listen for Pebble's family. The forest seemed to lean close, curious about the small human who walked with wolves. At a clearing round as a bowl, the moonlight looked sleepy and thin. Pebble stopped and whimpered. Milo crouched down and rubbed behind Pebble's ears the way Silver Wolf had shown him. A soft hoot answered, an old voice from a hollow log. It was Pebble's grandmother, muttering wolf songs. "We have lost the moonstone," she said between hoots. "When the stone dimmed, our paths grew muddled. We need its silver best to hold the night together." Milo felt braver than he had thought possible. The moonstone, Milo learned, was a small glowing pebble that hung in a hollow tree long ago. It kept the dark soft and friendly so animals and people could dream without worry. But tonight it lay dull somewhere beyond the moss and the fern. "Will you help us find it?" Silver Wolf asked. Milo's hands tingled. He thought of his warm cottage and his mother's lullaby, and he nodded. "We will find it together," he promised, and the wolves echoed the promise like a ripple. They followed a path of faint footprints that shone a whisper in the damp ground, little paw prints, and a few human boot marks. Sometimes the trail led them to a brook that giggled over stones, sometimes to a patch of ferns that smelled like pepper and rain. Milo sang softly the lullaby his mother hummed to him, and the wolves learned the tune and hummed along. The music felt like a silver kite tugging them forward through shadow and root. At last they reached a hill of black moss and old stones. The moonstone's faint breath seemed close, but between the pack and the hill a low, rustling sound lived, a fence of bramble guarded by a tangled thorn bush. In its center, a little gap had been chewed by something with clever teeth. Milo knelt and peered through. On the other side, the moonstone sat on a flat root, pale as milk and only whispering light. Milo held his breath. Some things look small until you see them glow. A rustle made Milo turn. Two bright eyes peeked from the bramble. It was a fox with a scalloped ear and a tail like a feather. The fox had found the moonstone first but could not carry it. "I wanted to keep it for myself," the fox whispered. Milo felt the old surprise that sometimes still lives in his chest. Then he remembered the wolf words for friend and said them softly. The fox blinked, and something small and shy melted in her gaze. Milo spoke again, slowly. He offered the fox a piece of his red scarf, just a ribbon to remember them by. The fox took it and tied it around her neck like a tiny flag. "We can share," Milo said. The wolves wagged their tails in agreement, and Pebble barked a bright little sound. The fox stepped out of the bramble, careful and proud, and together they lifted the moonstone onto a soft bed of leaves. It blinked awake, just a little, like a firefly rubbing its eyes. The moonstone's light spread, like butter on warm toast, until the forest breathed with silver. Moss turned to velvet, and shadows no longer looked sharp and hungry. The wolves howled a soft, round note that rolled up and into the sky. Milo cupped his hands and caught a little moonbeam. He thought of his mother singing and his cottage light. His heart felt full and wide as the world. Pebble snuggled into Milo's lap and fell fast asleep, dreaming of little stone games. They had one last task: return Pebble to his den across the brook and the hill. The wolves formed a slow ring, and Silver Wolf led with steady paw beats. Milo walked between two friendly noses and felt like he belonged to both the forest and the cottage at once. When they reached the den, Pebble's family rushed out with nuzzles and excited wuffs. The den glowed with the moonstone's new light, and the whole pack circled like a warm blanket. Before Milo left, Silver Wolf bowed his head and pressed his warm nose to Milo's hands. "You have both forest and firelight in you," he said, in a language that felt like a promise. "Take care of them both." Milo hugged Pebble one last time, then hugged Silver Wolf. He walked back through the trees, following the glow that now soothed every shadow. The night felt larger and kinder than it had when he first stepped into the woods. When Milo came home, the cottage window was a gold square in the dark. His mother opened the door and wrapped him in a blanket like a storybook hug. Milo smelled of leaf and fox and rain, and he hummed the lullaby the wolves had learned. "Did you speak to wolves?" his mother asked with a smile that was both surprised and somehow expected. Milo nodded and told her the softest parts of the night while she made warm cocoa. That night, Milo tucked Pebble's ribbon, now a tiny, gentle knot on his windowsill where moonlight could touch it. He listened as the wolves' song floated like a far bell through the trees. His mother kissed his forehead and whispered, "Good dreams." Milo closed his eyes and dreamed of soft paws and silver stones. He dreamed of friends who were different and brave, and of how a small voice can make a great, gentle change in the dark. From then on, Milo visited the forest often. He would sit on the moss, speak wolf words, and sometimes teach children from the village how to listen with their hearts. The wolves showed the villagers where mushrooms grew and where the brook was safest to cross. People learned there was more to the forest than stories of fear. In the evenings, the wolves and the villagers would hum together under the moonstone's glow, a strange and beautiful choir of hoots, hums, and human lullabies. One bright morning, Milo found Pebble at the stream, chasing sunbeams and licking dew from a leaf. Pebble bounded over to Milo and dropped a small, smooth stone in the boy's hands. It was not the moonstone, but it glowed a little when Milo held it, like a secret remembered. Milo smiled and tucked it into his pocket. He had spoken to wolves and learned the world's quiet languages. He knew now that listening could make new friends and keep old lights shining. And sometimes, when the night drew a silver blanket over the world, Milo would sit with Silver Wolf and the pack under the bright, steady moonstone. They would share stories of tiny brave deeds and of how fear can turn to song when someone reaches out. Milo looked up at the sky and felt the smallness and the grandness at once. He put his hand on a warm wolf head and whispered in both languages, "Thank you." The wolves howled, a bright ribbon of sound that wrapped the whole forest in home. The monster under the bed's big surprise. Every night when the lights go down and the moon paints the carpet with silver stripes, Pip pulls the blanket up to the chin and listens. There is a tiny thump, a whispery rumble, then a small sound like someone counting socks. Pip thinks, what if there is a monster under the bed? This thought wiggles like a tickle. Pip imagines scary shadows, big teeth, and thunderous roars, but the house smells like warm toast and safe bedtime instead. Night after night, Pip pretends to sleep with one eye open. Little noises come from under the bed. A shuffle, a soft humming, a tiny tap like someone placing a cup. Pip listens closely and hears muffled singing, 2 notes then 3. The singing is silly, not scary. It sounds like someone practicing a song about socks and spoons. Pip wiggles the toes and thinks, maybe a tiny friend lives there. Pip imagines what a tiny friend might like for a snack. One night, Pip decides to check. Quiet as a mouse, Pip slides off the bed and kneels down. The air smells like warm cinnamon and clean laundry. Pip leans closer and whispers, "Hello?" The whisper returns in a soft echo, "Hello, Pip." A tiny face with twinkling eyes peeks from the dark. It is not teethy or scary. It is round and furry with little horns and a shy grin. The monster says its name in a small voice, "I am Muffin." Muffin waves a sticky paw and holds a tiny paper hat. Muffin is not a scary monster at all. Muffin tiptoes in socks and collects lost things, single socks, toy spoons, tiny paper crowns. Muffin hums softly and arranges treasures on a little mat under the bed. Pip giggles. Muffin's favorite game is making a missing sock parade. Each sock gets its own drum roll and little bow. Muffin lines them up, polishes them with a puff of giggle sneeze, and gives them names like Mr. Stripe and Twinkle Toes. Pip claps so softly the moon giggles. Muffin loves parties. Tiny, quiet parties with cozy blankets and crumb-sized cakes. Muffin practices party songs all night, trying out silly words and funny drum beats with an old bottle cap. Pip listens to Muffin's careful practice and learns the chorus. Clap your paws, clap your toes, twirl your hat, and wiggle your nose. Muffin bows to an imaginary audience and blushes blue. Sometimes Muffin forgets to be quiet, and Pip laughs so hard the room shakes like a giggling jelly. Pip decides to help with the big surprise. SHHH, Pip whispers and reaches into the toy box for a paper hat. Together, they fold tiny hats from the last page of a storybook. Muffin giggles and ties a tiny ribbon around a sock. The two of them color a banner with crayon stars and hang it on a string made of floss. Muffin makes a list: 1 hat, 1 sock stage, 1 soft drum, and 1 guest, Pip. Pip feels brave and excited, heart thumping like a little frog. The next night, Muffin whispers that the big surprise will happen when the clock shows sleepy 12. Pip pretends to snore with great gusto and waits. Muffin scurries. Soft feet patter on the floor, tiny lamps flicker, and the banner floats up like a shy cloud. Then Muffin taps Pip's foot. Now, Pip blinks and sees the room gently glow. Little cookie crumbs are arranged into a heart, the striped sock is on a tiny pedestal, and a paper hat sits on Teddy Bear's head. Pip feels warm all over. Suddenly, Muffin begins the party song with the practiced chorus. Pip claps paws and toes, well, hands and toes. They tap the bottle cap drum and march in a slow, wobbly parade around the bed. Muffin leads, wobbling with proud, tiny stomps while Pip hums along. The moon leans close to listen. Even Teddy Bear bounces his stitched knee. Outside, the color of the night seems to hum along in soft blues and sleepy pinks. The room feels like a giggle wrapped in a blanket. At the end of the parade, Muffin presents the biggest surprise of all. Muffin hands Pip a tiny box tied with a crumbly ribbon. Inside is the missing sock, clean, starry, and smiling as if it had been on a very good trip. Pip blinks and hugs the sock to the chest. Muffin says, "I found it on the laundry line road." Pip laughs and thanks Muffin with the biggest, slobbery hug a tiny person can give. Muffin blushes teal and giggles until the giggles turn to sleepy yawns. Morning comes with a gentle tippy-tap of sunlight. Pip wakes with a smile and sees the banner drooping like a sleepy flower and the tiny hats in a cozy pile. The sock sits proudly on the bedside table. Pip tells the family about the monster under the bed. Pip's voice is bright and brave. "Muffin is my friend." The family laughs, brings a muffin, real, sweet, and warm for the tiny guest, and helps Pip leave a small note by the bed that says, "Thank you, Muffin." Muffin peeks out one last time, shy and proud. Muffin leaves quietly when the house is awake, carrying tiny crumbs and a little bundle of giggle dust. Pip waves and promises to visit every night. Sometimes they leave a single cookie on the mat, and sometimes a crayon drawing. The house keeps both secrets and smiles. Pip learns that not every monster is scary. Some are helpers of lost things, keepers of quiet parties, and best of all, friends who love tiny surprises. That night, as Pip pulls the blanket tight and the moon hums outside the window, Pip feels a soft bump under the bed, the sound of socks practicing their bows. Pip smiles wide and whispers into the pillow, "Good night, Muffin." Under the bed, a small voice answers sleepily, "Good night, Pip." The big surprise was not that a monster lived there, but that the monster was a friend with party plans, kind paws, and a very good memory for missing socks. Pip drifts to sleep on a cloud of giggles. The Castle in the Clouds. Mila loved looking up. She had a small ladder on her window and a big jar of pretend clouds. One bright morning, she climbed the ladder and reached out to touch the sky. Her fingers found something soft and bouncy, like cotton candy that giggled. When she pulled her hand back, a tiny puff of cloud fox popped out with a surprised sneeze. It blinked with button eyes and gave a little wag of its fluffy tail, as if it had been waiting for a friend. The fox yawned a tiny swirl of mist and said, in a noise like a giggle, hello. Mila laughed and named him Pip because his nose sounded like a tiny pop. Pip hopped onto her lap and left a little sparkle on her sleeve. Windy arrived, not as a person, but as a dancing breeze that tickled Mila's hair and made Pip's tail fluff up in delight. Windy hummed a soft tune that sounded like someone rubbing leaves together, and it smelled faintly of warm bread and rain. Windy whispered a secret. There was a castle hiding high inside the clouds, full of rooms that rolled like soft cushions and roofs made of candy-colored swirls. Mila's eyes grew huge. Pip pranced and made a tiny cloud trail like footprints. Windy bobbed and pointed with a puff toward a glittering shape way up above. Together, they climbed a ladder made of silver ropes that dangled from a cloud, each step singing a little bell sound. The ladder was safe and tickly, and when they reached the top, the castle doors opened wide with a friendly creak. Inside the castle, everything felt soft like a hug. The halls floated and swayed gently, and the floors were made of sleepy cloud pillows that bounced a little with every step. Star lanterns bobbed above like low-flying fireflies, each one humming a tiny story when Mila reached up to touch them. Pip chased a lantern that zipped away with a merry buzz, and Windy giggled until the soft curtains made a happy swishing sound. Mila clapped. The castle clapped back with a faint, chiming echo. It all seemed as kind as a warm blanket. They found a room where the walls were painted with tiny smiling moons, and in the corner rested a moon drum. When Mila tapped it lightly, the drum made a round, sleepy beat like a heart saying good night. The sound floated through the castle and made the star lanterns shimmer brighter. Pip curled up and listened, and Windy puffed soft notes that made the curtains ripple like slow waves. Each beat felt like a story being told, and Mila imagined all the nights the drum had sung to the clouds before she arrived. As they wandered, the castle began to sway more than usual. A big gust of giggling wind rushed by and tugged a candy cupola like a hat on a head. A few star lanterns bobbed away, and the silver ropes jingled in surprise. Mila felt her stomach do a little flip, but Pip nudged her hand and Windy wrapped an encouraging curl around her wrist. "We can fix it," Windy hummed, and Mila took a deep breath. She remembered how she once helped a neighbor find a missing sock, and the feeling of being brave bubbled up. Together, they sang a steady song, tapping the moon drum to keep the beat. Mila sang about helping and sharing, Pip sang little pop noises that sounded like good jokes, and Windy hummed like a lullaby that smelled of rain. The castle listened. Each kind word made the ropes feel stronger and the walls puff back into shape. The star lanterns floated home, one by one, remembering their bright places. The candy cupolas righted themselves and gave a tiny twinkle, as if the castle were winking its thanks to the new friends. They explored a playground room where bells grew on cloud trees and slides went down into soft fluff. Pip slid first and came out giggling like a windy bell. Mila climbed the cloud tree and rung a bell that sang the name of the sun, which made a tiny patch of blue peel through the clouds like paint. Windy chased the bell's echo until it returned to sleep in a star lantern. They played until Mila's cheeks were rosy and her eyes shone with a tired, happy kind of sparkle. When the sun began to yawn, Windy told them it was time to go home, but the castle had one more gift. In the tallest tower, a window opened, and a soft, warm light poured out like a bedtime blanket. The star lanterns lined up like a parade to the ladder, and each gave Mila a tiny, shimmering ribbon to tuck into her hair. Pip curled into a fluffy ball and pressed his forehead to hers. "We will come back," Mila promised, and the castle hummed a little tune that felt like a promise back. Back down the silver ropes they climbed, each step ringing like tiny bells, and the ladder folded itself into a soft cloud when they touched the ground. Mila put her hands into her pockets and found the shimmering ribbon glowing very gently. Pip did a happy little dance and then tucked himself into Mila's scarf like a tiny, sleepy cloud. Windy gave them a twirling goodbye that made the leaves on Mila's tree wink. The sky settled. The castle floated higher, a smiling patchwork in the clouds, waving with its candy cupolas. That night, tucked under her blanket, Mila placed the ribbon on her bedside table. The star lanterns hummed faintly from the sky, and the moon drum tapped a sleepy pulse in her dreams. Pip curled by her pillow, warm and soft, and Windy slipped in through the crack of the window to kiss Mila's cheek with a breeze that smelled like rain and cookies. Mila closed her eyes and remembered the castle's clap and the drum's friendly thump. She felt held, cozy, and a little braver than before. In the morning, Mila woke with a tiny cloud of sparkles sitting on her shelf, a little note tied to it that read, "See you soon." She smiled and slid on her cloud-patterned boots. Outside, the world felt softer, as if it had learned to hum. Every time Mila helped someone or shared a laugh, she felt the castle's tune swell inside her chest. Pip pranced at her feet, ready for another day of small adventures. And high above, the castle in the clouds twinkled, keeping its door open for friends with brave hearts. The Puppy Who Chased Rainbows. Pip was a small, bouncy puppy with golden fur that glittered when he shook. One morning, after a soft spring shower, Pip looked out the kitchen window and gasped. High in the sky, a bright, curvy rainbow arched from tree to tree. Pip's tail began to wag like a metronome. He had never seen such colors shimmer together, and in his puppy heart, a daring idea grew. He would chase that rainbow and see where the colors lived. Pip darted out the back door into Grandma Mabel's garden. The air smelled of damp earth and flower petals. Grandma Mabel stood near the herb row, apron on, and she laughed when she saw Pip racing by with muddy paws. She waved and called, "Be careful, little one." Pip only barked happily and raced toward the bright curve of color, thinking the rainbow must be close. He skipped over stepping stones and chased each shimmer like a bouncing toy. A small bluebird named Bee fluttered down from a branch and landed on the garden fence. She tilted her head and sang a curious chirp. "You can't catch a rainbow, Pip," Bee trilled. Pip cocked his head and blinked with big, round eyes. That answer made him more determined, not less. "I will try," he yipped, and off he bounded, Bee chirping overhead. Together, they left the garden path and leapt into green grass that tickled Pip's paws. Across a little wooden bridge they went, where a happy frog named Flip croaked hello from a lily pad. Flip wore a tiny green smile and popped up to say, "Where are you going?" "Pip." Pip wagged and pointed with his nose toward the glowing arch. Flip stretched and leaped with a playful splash, happy to come along. The trio trotted past sun-warmed stones and puddles that winked like mirrors, each puddle puzzled by Pip's hopeful nose. The path led to a meadow where clover grew soft as cushions. Colors seemed to hum there, the rainbow's bottom kneed close to the ground, winking like a shy friend. Pip ran faster, paws thumping the soft earth. Bee zipped between wildflowers, her tiny wings flicking ruby and sapphire shadows. Flip hopped from blossom to blossom, delighted. Pip jumped and leaped, feeling he might jump so high the rainbow would finally let him touch its colors. Pip made a big, brave leap and pawed at the air. For a heartbeat, colors seemed to tremble. A warm, friendly sun peeked out from the clouds and smiled down, bathing Pip in golden light. But the rainbow shimmered and slid like light on a bubble. Pip landed in a soft tumble of grass and giggled. Though his paws barely touched color, the thrill of trying felt like discovering a new kind of game, one that laughed and ran as much as he did. Near the meadow's edge, under a willow that swayed like a sleepy curtain, Pip found a puddle that wasn't like the others. It reflected the sky in colors so bright it hummed a tiny tune. Pip peered in and saw the rainbow ripple back at him. He poked the water with a curious nose. The puddle tickled, and the reflection winked. Off came a tiny sprinkle of color sparks that danced on Pip's whiskers and made him sneeze a happy puppy sneeze. The puddle giggled like a tiny bell and sent up a ring of color sparks that floated around Pip. Bee hopped down to peck a spark on Pip's nose. Flip tried to catch a sparkle with a quick frog jump. The spark smelled faintly like sunshine and tasted like giggles. Pip rolled and chased them in a merry tumble, each spark bursting into a soft pop of color that made the meadow smell sweeter. The rainbow had given Pip a gift, pieces of color to play with. Suddenly, the sky let out a soft, sprinkle song and tiny raindrops began to fall again. They tapped the leaves like a lullaby, and each raindrop made the little color sparks shimmer into teeny rainbows that danced around Pip's ears. Pip shook himself like a small windmill and watched the droplets scatter in 1,000 tiny arcs. The meadow became a twinkling place where many small rainbows lived close to the ground and near each friendly nose. Pip paused and breathed in the moist, sweet air. He realized something soft and new. While the faraway rainbow arched high and proud, these little rainbow boughs at his paws were bright, real, and close. He could sniff them, nudge them, and sit inside their tiny glow. Pip nosed a little rainbow into a sunbeam and watched it warm like a cookie. He barked a delighted puppy bark, because this kind of rainbow was all around him when he stopped to look. At that moment, Grandma Mabel found them, wiping muddy hands on her apron and smiling wide. She wrapped a soft towel around Pip's damp fur and hummed a cozy tune. "Did you find the rainbow, Pip?" she asked. Pip pressed his nose into the towel and wagged, bursting little happy yips. Grandma Mabel scooped him up for a gentle cuddle and offered tiny warm biscuits for everyone. The friends sat together, sharing biscuits, stories, and the glow of small colors. Grandma Mabel hummed, then carefully painted a paper kite with all the colors they had seen: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Pip sat very still, watching the brush make swirls and stripes. Bee peeped approvingly and Flip clapped his small frog hands. When the kite was ready, Grandma Mabel tied a string safe around Pip's collar so he could carry the kite as they walked. Pip felt proud and important, like the leader of color. They walked back to the meadow and Grandma Mabel let the kite soar. The paper bird bobbed and danced, and as it climbed, Stripes of paint fluttered like tiny rainbows of its own. Pip trotted along with the string in his mouth, prancing proudly as the wind lifted the colors high. Bees hummed around the flowers and bees sang. Flip hopped in the sunshine, eyes closed, smiling. Pip felt the colors trail behind him like a happy tail. As the kite climbed, it seemed to scoop up the sky and carry a handful of color back down toward them. Little flakes of painted brightness drifted like confetti and settled softly on Pip's head and on Grandma Mabel's apron. Pip pranced in a slow, happy circle, feeling as if he had caught pieces of the rainbow after all, not the whole arch, but color that filled his paws and heart. Laughter bubbled up from everyone, ringing like tiny bells. When the sun began to lower, the rainbow dimmed into a soft promise across the clouds. Pip curled into Grandma Mabel's lap, tired but glad. He thought about the big rainbow he had chased and all the little rainbows he had found, the puddles' sparkles, the tiny bows in the rain, the painted kite's flakes, and the warm colors of friends' smiles. He realized chasing had led him to more joy than catching ever could. Joy lived in the journey itself. Grandma Mabel carried Pip inside, towel dry and warm, while Bee tucked into a cozy nest, and Flip found a damp, comfy leaf to rest on. Pip's last puppy thoughts before sleep were twinkling pictures of all the colors he had sniffed and chased. He dreamed small rainbows that fit in his paws and big rainbow arcs that he would watch from a safe, loving lap. In his sleep, he chased colors gently and woke with a smile. Morning came and Pip woke with a little yawn, happy as a sunflower. He trotted to the window and saw a faint arc high and thin in the far sky. Pip's tail thumped, but this time he sat quietly and watched the rainbow turn the morning light into gentle color. He knew now that rainbows were not things to catch, but songs to follow, stories to share, and bright pieces of every day. Pip wagged, ready for new little adventures. The Little Ghost Who Loved Cake. In a hush of silver moonlight, Little Ghost floated through Cozy Hollow with a happy wiggle. Little Ghost could not taste cakes, but oh, the smells made the tiny glow brighter. Cake smelled like giggles and warm hugs, sugar, vanilla, and tiny cinnamon secrets. Every night Little Ghost peeked in Greta, the cat baker's window, to watch frosting whirl and eggs and flour dance. Greta hummed soft tunes while bowls spun, and Little Ghost clapped its little ghostly hands, delighted by each plop and swirl. Greta always left her bakery window just a tiny bit open so the sweetest smells could float out to the street. Little Ghost loved to ride those smells like a kite. One evening, a soft bell rang outside the bakery door. Wibble the mouse scurried in with bright whiskers and a squeaky hello. Wibble loved crumbs and stories. Together, Wibble and Little Ghost watched Greta roll a big cake batter into tall pans. Little Ghost blinked with joy as the cake puffed up like a fluffy cloud. One night, a town notice fluttered by the bakery door. Cozy Hollow was planning a moonlight picnic for all the neighbors. "We need a very special cake," cried Wibble, eyes wide with crumbs of excitement. Little Ghost wiggled and twinkled. "I can help," thought Little Ghost, though friends knew it could not nibble a single bite. Little Ghost wanted nothing more than to make the picnic perfect for everyone, so it decided to be the helper with the brightest glow. Greta smiled and said, "We'll bake a birthday cake big as the hill." She opened a jar of sprinkles that sparkled like tiny fireworks. Little Ghost floated close, feeling proud but puzzled. "How can I help?" it asked in a whisper that sounded like a soft bell. Greta tapped a paw to her apron. "You can do what you do best, light the candles with your glow, and tell gentle jokes if any candles feel shy." Little Ghost beamed a tiny, ghostly grin. The day of the picnic arrived with the moon smiling wide. Friends carried the soft red and white checkered blanket to the hill. Greta rolled the big birthday cake onto the blanket, frosting it into clouds of white and painting stripes of rainbow inside. Little Ghost floated above and watched every ribbon of icing. Wibble danced with a tiny spoon and tried a crumb with a happy squeak. Even though Little Ghost could not taste, it felt the friends' joy bubble up like the best kind of fizz inside its glow. When Greta lifted the cake to set sugar candle stars on top, the tiniest candle refused to stay lit. "Oh dear," Greta whispered. The friends huddled close. Little Ghost floated forward and blew the gentlest of gusts that glowed warm, not a wind that would blow out candles, but a glow that made tiny flames feel brave. Each candle flickered awake, shining like a row of tiny moons. The birthday cake seemed to sigh in delight, dusted with sparkles that danced like fireflies. As everyone cheered, a sprinkle storm began not from the sky, but from Wibble's clumsy spill of the jar. Sprinkles hopped and twinkled across the blanket like confetti. Little Ghost laughed with a tinkling sound that made the sprinkles shimmer different colors. "A sprinkle dance," Greta sang, twirling a spatula. Little Ghost fluttered through the dancing sprinkles, feeling like it could taste color itself when friends smiled. The air smelled even sweeter now, with cinnamon and moon sugar that made tiny hearts skip. Just then, a little kitten from down the lane arrived late and timidly asked if there was room at the picnic. Her name was Minka and her whiskers trembled. Greta scooped her into a warm paw and said, "There's always room for one more." Little Ghost drifted nearer and wrapped a friendly glow around Minka like a soft blanket. Minka's eyes sparkled, and she purred like a little bell. Everyone at the picnic felt cozy and full of kindness, the sort of sweet that tastes like friendship. After singing a merry song, Greta carefully cut a slice of the birthday cake for each friend. Wibble nibbled, Minka purred, and Greta savored a spoonful with closed eyes. Little Ghost drifted through the feast, collecting tiny crumbs of laughter and storing them in its glow. When a shy cloud drifted over the moon, the candle flames wavered, but Little Ghost flared a little brighter, and the light came back. "Thank you," Greta said softly. "Your glow keeps the magic alive." At the end of the night, everyone lay on their backs looking up at the friendly silver moon. Little Ghost felt a warm, new feeling settle inside. Sharing made its glow feel fuller than any cake could. The moon winked as if to say, "Well done." Greta tucked the last crumbs into a tiny bag for Wibble and gave Little Ghost a flour-dusted kiss on the forehead. Wibble whispered a secret recipe for midnight muffins. They all promised to bake, share, and make picnics together again. Little Ghost drifted home that night with pockets full of laughter and a glow that hummed like a small bell. Though it never ate cake, the memory of frosting clouds and candlelight wrapped around it like a warm scarf. Under the silver moon, Little Ghost dreamed of sprinkles that sang and candles that told jokes. Every night after, Little Ghost visited Greta's window to watch new cakes rise and new friends arrive, knowing that the best flavors were kindness and shared smiles. The cat who could tell time. Milo lived in a small yellow house at the corner of Sunflower Lane. He was a striped cat with whiskers that shimmered when he was excited. Milo loved purring on windowsills, chasing sunbeams, and listening to the tick-tock of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Every morning he watched Rosie, the little girl next door, hop out of bed and shout, "Good morning." Milo wished he understood why some moments felt bright and some felt sleepy. One afternoon, Milo found something shiny tucked under a loose floorboard in the hallway. It was a small brass pocket watch with a tiny star etched on its lid. When Milo touched the watch with his paw, his whiskers glowed and hummed a little tune. Tick, the tiny bluebird who lived in the apple tree outside, flew in to listen. The watch did not tell time in numbers. It sang soft songs of wake up and rest instead. Milo pressed the watch to his whiskers and listened. He heard a tiny melody, ding-dong swoosh. His whiskers twitched, and suddenly Milo knew it was time to curl into a nap. He trotted into Rosie's room and tapped her shoulder with his paw. Rosie blinked, smiled, and said, "Time for my cozy blanket." Milo felt proud. The watch seemed to help him feel which moments were bouncy and which were soft and yawny. At midday, Milo wandered into the garden, the pocket watch warm against his fur. Tick sang a quick chirp and the watch hummed a bright, bouncy tune. Milo's whiskers sparkled with sunshine. He knew it was playtime. He darted after fluttering leaves, chased his shadow, and invited the toy mouse to a game. Rosie brought a little ball and laughed. Everyone in the garden followed Milo's gentle rhythm, and the day hummed with playful beats. Sometimes the watch sang a slow, sleepy song as the sun started to tip toward the trees. Milo's whiskers dimmed into a soft glow. He gathered Rosie, the toy mouse, and even Tick for a gentle story by the grandfather clock. The old clock swung its pendulum and hummed a deep, steady beat that matched Milo's purr. The melody told them it was almost time for warm milk and soft blankets. One windy day, the pocket watch slipped from Milo's paws and rolled out the window toward the garden. Milo's whiskers trembled. Without the watch, he felt small and a little lost. Rosie hurried outside, and the two friends searched under flower pots and behind shrubs. Tick sang question melodies while the toy mouse sniffed along the path. The watch was nowhere to be found, and Milo wondered how he would tell time again. They followed a faint ticking sound to the old oak tree where the neighborhood squirrels played. There, halfway up a root, the pocket watch lay resting on a soft bed of moss. Milo gingerly climbed and nudged it with his paw, but the watch would not tick. Milo's whiskers did not glow. He felt a tiny pinch of sadness. Rosie sat beneath the oak and hummed a tune. The friends held hands, paws, and fingers, hoping for a little bit of magic. Rosie whispered, "Maybe the watch needs us to listen differently." Milo closed his eyes and remembered how the grandfather clock's pendulum felt steady inside his chest when he purred. He tried to listen to his own heartbeat and the world's tiny sounds. A bee humming, a distant bicycle bell, Tick's tiny song. Slowly, Milo's whiskers began to glow faintly. He felt the time inside his own soft paws, and a new kind of knowing warmed him. Milo learned he could feel time by gentle rhythms, quick beats for running, light tinkles for play, and slow sighs for sleep. He carried the pocket watch back home, but now he didn't need it to tell when to jump or when to hush. Rosie clapped and said, "You can tell time, Milo." The toy mouse smiled in its small, sleepy way. Even the grandfather clock seemed to nod its wooden face as if to approve Milo's new skill. Word spread around Sunflower Lane. Neighbors came with questions. When should my baby cat nap? When should I bake the bread? Milo listened with his whiskers and answered with small melodies. He would hum a bright chirp for morning chores and a slow lullaby for bedtime. People clapped when the bread came out perfect and when little kittens stopped fussing because Milo's soft timing soothed them. He was small, but everyone trusted his kind knowing. Then came the day of the big picnic in the meadow. The whole neighborhood spread the red checkered blanket and set out jars of honey and blueberry pies. But oh no, the sun hid behind shy clouds and everyone worried the cakes would be soggy. Rosie squeezed Milo's paw and asked if he could help choose the best moment for cake. Milo felt the flutter in his whiskers and listened to the meadow's hush. He knew the perfect time would come if they waited kindly together. Milo told the neighbors to set their plates down for now and to sing a quiet waiting song. They hummed together, a soft chorus like a warm blanket. Tick sang a bright note from the branch above, and the pocket watch tucked in Milo's collar chimed once with a tiny star spark. Slowly, the clouds parted like curtains, and a ribbon of golden sunlight landed on the blueberry pie. Everyone cheered and shared cake and laughter. After the picnic, Milo felt thoughtful. He loved helping others know when to play and when to rest, but he also liked surprises and quiet naps. Rosie curled up beside him and whispered, "Thank you for listening with your whiskers." Milo purred a low, contented hum. He realized time was not one straight line. It was many small songs and gentle beats stitched together. That thought made him smile, and his whiskers glimmer like tiny stars. Night came, and the streetlights blinked awake like sleepy fireflies. Milo would tell one small bedtime tune to each neighbor as they tucked in their sleepy heads. He hummed by windows and on porches, and tiny hearts learned the comfort of familiar rhythms. Rosie closed her eyes with a smile and whispered goodnight to Milo. The grandfather clock counted slow and steady, and Milo's whiskers shone a gentle moonlight silver, keeping a soft promise to watch over time. Sometimes Milo still liked to hide the pocket watch in silly places, so friends would giggle while searching. Once the toy mouse found it under Rosie's shoe, and Tick pecked a small tune in triumph. They laughed together because they knew Milo's time-telling came from inside, not only from shiny things. The watch was a friend, but Milo's listening heart and curious whiskers were the true magic everyone loved. Years later, children who grew up on Sunflower Lane told their children about Milo, the little cat who could tell time with his whiskers. They taught them the quiet songs he hummed, a peppy chirp for wake up, a bouncy jingle for play, and a soft, slow hum for sleep. The pocket watch sat on a shelf like a tiny treasure, and Milo's whiskers kept twinkling, passing on gentle rhythms that helped everyone find the right moment for everything. On quiet mornings, you might still hear a tiny, happy tune drifting down Sunflower Lane. If you listen very closely, you can feel the moment shift like a page turning in a gentle book. Milo napples in the sun with whiskers that glow like little lamps, and somewhere a bluebird sings a time melody. The world keeps its soft rhythms, and the children who know Milo's songs smile a little wider, knowing that time can be kind and gentle.